Hogwarts. My four-dimensional trash bag. Chapter 41. Today's transfiguration class was right in Lin's comfort zone. Although he hadn't intended to show off, Professor McGonagall actively gave him many opportunities to do so. Having already learned from Professor Flitwick about Lin's exceptional talent in transfiguration, she also had a slight intention to test him in class. From the most basic task of turning a matchstick into a needle, to the later live transfiguration of small creatures that left other young wizards in awe. Lin performed exceptionally well in all of them. The difficulty of transfiguration, starting from zero, can basically be divided into 7 stages, shaping inanimate objects similar to sculpture, which is the foundation of transfiguration, transfiguration from inanimate to inanimate, inanimate to animate, animate to inanimate, animate to animate, animate transfiguration from inanimate to animate, and human transfiguration. Lin was already capable of the 4th stage, animate to inanimate transfiguration, transforming small living creatures like beetles and mice into small items such as buttons and teacups. For a young wizard who had only self-studied for 2 months during the holidays, this was already a remarkable achievement. Lin, who scored a whopping 30 points in Transfiguration class, maxed out Professor McGonagall's favorability. The usually fair and strict professor didn't go easy on him, and the Ravenclaw students taking the class with him had no objections to the extra points. Your transfiguration skills are already at a 3rd-year level, Lin. Professor McGonagall said with satisfaction. In fact, if you just pay attention to and correct some minor issues in your transfiguration, I believe you will soon reach an excellent level among 4th-year students. I must admit, and I must tell you, that in magical studies, the learning of transfiguration relies most heavily on talent. Not every master of charms can go far in transfiguration. The surprises you've given me are far more than what Professor Flitwick told me. Then, Professor McGonagall. A young wizard raised a hand and asked, "Were you that amazing when you were a student, Professor?" Such a thoughtless question could easily offend someone, but Professor McGonagall didn't mind at all. When I was studying at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall recalled briefly, I registered as a fully qualified animagus at the Ministry of Magic by the end of my 2nd year. Even before I started school, I had already learned how to turn one small animal into another. Like this. Professor McGonagall didn't even draw her wand, she simply pointed a finger, and a white mouse used for transfiguration experiments transformed into a parrot, which flapped its wings, flew a circle above the classroom, and then turned back into a white mouse upon landing in its cage. However, I need to tell you that in transfiguration, Hogwarts is not ahead of other magic schools. In distant Africa, the Uagadou School of Magic has astonishing research achievements in transfiguration. It is not uncommon there for wizards to master animagus transfiguration at the age of 14, which is when you would be in your 4th year. Most of them can complete animagus transfiguration in their 5th or 6th year. This form of transfiguration is hailed as the ultimate in transfiguration, the most difficult human transfiguration, but this is also related to their traditional customs and casting methods. Before your abilities meet the requirements, I forbid you from attempting advanced transfiguration at will, as this will lead to very bad results. Perhaps one day in the not-too-distant future, you will have the opportunity to compete and spar with students from other magic schools. At that time, you will witness firsthand the vibrant splendor of the magical world. Magic is truly wonderful, and there are fascinating magical practices around the world waiting to be explored and researched. So, what is Hogwarts best at? Hermione raised her hand high, very curious about this point. Hogwarts is a comprehensive magic school. We have excellent teachers in every subject. For the core magical studies of charms, transfiguration, potions, and herbology, your Professor Flitwick, Professor Snape, and Professor Sprout are all incredibly skilled and have received many international honors. If you diligently follow each professor's teachings, I believe you will all benefit greatly. Professor McGonagall seemed to be somewhat evasive with this question, as Hogwarts truly didn't have one particularly outstanding subject. Transfiguration wasn't as good as Uagadou in Africa, herbology wasn't as good as Castelobruxo in Brazil, and while charms and potions weren't bad, they didn't have a significant leading edge. Flitwick and Snape were very capable, but not to the extent of being unparalleled throughout history. They were merely excellent elite professors who could rank among the top globally. After all, they had all achieved master-level titles and were well regarded in magic schools worldwide. Not every professor is a master in a particular field, and Hogwarts boasts a very high standard in its teaching staff, which is the foundation of its long-standing reputation as a prestigious school. What about Defense Against the Dark Arts? Harry asked curiously. Her favorite textbook was Dark Forces, a Guide to Self-Protection, for Defense Against the Dark Arts. Defense Against the Dark Arts. Professor McGonagall looked troubled, as this subject had always been a sore point for Hogwarts. I just hope Professor Quirrell won't disappoint you too much, alas. Alright, today's homework is to copy the transfiguration taboos from Gamp's Law of Elemental Transfiguration. This is content you must commit to memory for transfiguration. Also, practice today's lesson content, turning a matchstick into a needle. I have another class this Thursday, but I will check your practice results in next Tuesday's transfiguration class. Class dismissed. The young wizard stood up, chattering excitedly. Lynn was surrounded by many curious classmates who wanted to ask him how to practice transfiguration well. After dealing with the enthusiastic classmates, Lynn finally managed to break free and let out a sigh of relief. Looks like you're quite popular, aren't you? Cho, you're here. Lynn turned his head and saw Cho Chang walking with her friends. Why do you look like you have a cold? Cho's nose was a bit red, and she had a thin scarf wrapped around her neck. I do have a bit of a cold, and it's all because of you. Cho rolled her beautiful eyes and grumbled. Oh Tilda, the girl next to Cho drew out the sound, still saying you weren't out on a date last night. That's not true, Marietta. Cho playfully slapped her best friend, then introduced her to Lynn. This is Marietta Edgecombe, my roommate and my best friend. Hello, Marietta. Lynn extended his hand and shook hers, giving a simple greeting. A first-year student, right? Marietta blinked, sizing Lynn up. It seems the Ravenclaw boys are going to cry into their pillows. Cho is pursued by many, you know. I wish I were her boyfriend, but unfortunately, I'm not. Lynn spread his hands. After all, having a girl jump into your arms is a very satisfying feeling. Cho needs a warm hug right now, doesn't she? Get out of here, shoo shoo. Cho waved her hand dismissively. You think you can take advantage of your big sister? I'll just go to the hospital wing later for some stimulating potion. A lot of people have colds at this time. Madame Pomfrey is probably going to be busy. Watching their interactions, Marietta also had some doubts about whether they were actually dating. From how they were acting, it really didn't seem like it. By the way, where's Harry? Isn't she with you? Harry made a new girlfriend today, she ditched me a long time ago. Hey, Lynn, the unwanted one, want to go to lunch with your big sister? I'm afraid you'll give me your cold. You're asking for a beating. Chatting with Cho was actually quite a pleasant experience. After lunch, her good friend Marietta Edgecombe found an excuse to leave. Lynn accompanied Cho to the school hospital and received a pepper-up potion from Madame Pomfrey. Is it really bad? Lynn looked at the strange expression on Cho's face and asked her curiously. It's not exactly bad, but the taste is a bit odd. Oh, it's mint-flavored. As Cho spoke, Lynn caught a whiff of her breath, which smelled like spearmint. That's why it feels a bit strange, as if the potion's formula has changed. And does it smell a little stinky? Cho breathed into her palm, then held it to her nose for Lynn to smell. Maybe bad breath, Lynn said uncertainly, casting a suspicious glance at Cho. You have bad breath, you jerk, Lynn. I'll beat you to death. Girls should be reserved, don't just hit people casually, okay? It's because you don't speak properly, you deserve to be hit. Cho caught up to him in a few steps and landed two resounding but not very forceful punches on his back. His tilde my genetic lock has been pried open by you. I wasn't even using any strength, okay. Cho saw through Lynn's act instantly, and skipped along with her arms crossed. You've changed, Cho. You were so gentle when we first met. Why have you suddenly transformed? Oh, I get it. What do you get now? Girls, you have those few days every month when you're in a bad mood, right? Cho puffed out her cheeks slightly, turned her head, and mumbled indistinctly, even if you guessed right, so what? Don't go around telling people, okay. Actually, I can understand. Lynn began to spout nonsense with a serious face. Boys also have a few days each month when they're in a bad mood. Huh. Cho, who had never heard such a thing before, looked at Lin in confusion. What are you talking about? Boys have a few days each month when they're in their egg-changing period. During these days, they tend to be more sensitive and vulnerable, and occasionally suffer from stomachaches, as if someone is stabbing them with scissors inside their belly. But as long as you remember to eat 2 eggs in the morning, preferably hard-boiled, then there's no problem. But I didn't eat any today, the house elves didn't make hard-boiled eggs. I had no idea such a thing existed. Then Lin, the adorable Cho actually believed him, and a hint of concerned embarrassment flashed across her face. I'm fine. I have a naturally pure yang constitution, so I'm very robust. I'm immune to all poisons and impervious to all evils. Lin patted his chest, looking perfectly fine, but he was almost bursting with laughter. Then, I'm sorry about earlier. Cho, who had been fooled, was still a good child at heart. She was now concerned about Lin. What sorry? How formal. But Cho, you don't have a stomachache, do you? No, though it's a bit uncomfortable. As they spoke, they arrived at the base of the Ravenclaw Tower. Cho looked up at the long spiral staircase, her face falling. I suddenly don't want to go back to the common room. For Ravenclaw students, returning to the common room was actually quite a torment. Ravenclaw dormitories were in the West Tower of Hogwarts Castle, and in terms of height, they were even higher than the Gryffindor common room on the 8th floor, on the same level as the Astronomy Tower. If you had to count the floors, it was roughly equivalent to the 11th or 12th floor. Every Ravenclaw student, after graduation, had their most profound memory of their house, climbing the tower. What was despairing was that there were no shortcuts in Ravenclaw Tower. The Wizarding World did have magic-powered lifts, similar to elevators, which could be seen in other secret passages at Hogwarts, but they would never appear here. Why did you walk this way? Going to the library to read is better than going back. I didn't know, haha. Lin laughed awkwardly, he really hadn't thought about it just now. Then how about to the tent? The two exchanged glances and immediately agreed. Come over here and put the tent in the garden. Cho happily took Lin's hand and led him to an open-air courtyard nearby. This area was set up as a small garden, a common feature in Hogwarts Castle, with no fewer than 10 such spots. In the evening twilight, these places were popular rendezvous spots for couples, of course, when the weather was suitable. Lin pulled out the versatile tent, placed it on the open ground, and the two squeezed through the entrance. Disguise mode activated, and the interior instantly transformed into a common room. I want to soak in a hot spring. Upon entering the tent, Cho immediately became cheerful. Are you really okay soaking in a hot spring right now? Don't we have the adaptive lamp? With that, even if I get wet, my clothes won't get soaked. That's true, but only the swimming pool room has changing closets for swimsuits. The hot spring pool is part of the bathroom suite. What do you mean, Tilda? Cho pouted unhappily. Don't worry, I won't peek. If you really want to, just go soak. I'll take a nap. If I don't get enough rest, the afternoon's torment will be unbearable. What class do you have this afternoon? Defense against the dark arts. Lin looked utterly resigned. Quirrell's class, you don't even have to think to know how bad it is. I'm already showing early signs of an allergy to garlic. Is it that bad? Cho hadn't had this class yet, she wouldn't have it until Friday. None of the upperclassmen who've had his class haven't complained about him. You'll understand when you go. Lin shone the adaptive lamp on Cho, then walked to an empty space for resting beside the bath. Tatami mats were laid out here, a place for people to rest after soaking in the hot spring, with cushions that could serve as pillows. The sound of water entering reached him from behind, but Lin didn't strain his ears to listen. He had eaten a full lunch, and after closing his eyes, he soon fell asleep. Lin had a dream. He dreamt that he met a lost orange tabby kitten at Hogwarts and took on the role of cat owner, adopting it. The little orange cat was very cute and greedy. The saying, 9 out of 10 orange cats are fat, and the last one crushes the bed, was absolutely true. Under Lin's careful feeding, the little orange cat quickly evolved into an orange pig. The little orange cat, very affectionate with Lin, loved to lie on his chest when he took a nap. The feeling of being suffocated and unable to breathe was too real. So real that when Lin opened his eyes due to difficulty breathing, he indeed saw a human figure, heavier than the little orange cat, currently sleeping soundly with her head on his chest. Cho, wearing a thin sweater, was curled up, sleeping very peacefully on his chest. Consider it payback for that time you gave me a lap pillow. Unable to sleep, Lin looked up at the ceiling and used telekinesis to press the distant room button. The bathroom switched to the common room, and the somewhat hard tatami mats transformed into soft fur rugs. Cho turned over in her sleep, curling her legs into a more comfortable position. After covering her with a blanket, Lin took out a book and quietly read, not disturbing her nap. About an hour later, Cho, who had been napping nearby, gently opened her eyes. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her face looked a bit distressed. My stomach hurts. Cho lifted her little head to look at Lin beside her. This pitiful expression was a first for her face. Next time, I'll remember to bring you a bottle of brown sugar water, but today, I haven't prepared anything. Or, should I warm your stomach for you? Pervert, have your true colors been exposed? Cho's cheeks were slightly red. She slowly got up from the ground, her little mouth pouting high. Heaven and earth be my witness, if I were a pervert, and didn't peek at you soaking in the hot spring just now, I'd be struck by lightning. Amused by his words, a smile appeared on Cho's face, but soon, she looked troubled again, the stomachache was truly uncomfortable. Give me your hand. Cho extended her hand, and after Lin gently held her somewhat cold fingers, the warmth that transferred made her eyes light up. Are all boys' hands as warm as yours? You didn't know before. I haven't held hands with other boys or anything, how would I know? Then it truly is my honor, Miss Cho Chong. You got off easy. Cho turned around and leaned back. The very warm large cushion behind her relaxed her body a lot. Unlike her, who had somewhat cold hands and feet, Lin was like a furnace. They say children have 3 fires under their bottom, and Lin's firewood under his bottom must have been quite plentiful. Chu hadn't felt much before, but today, she felt this warmth was even cozier than the fireplace in the common room. Keep your hands still. Got that. I know, I'm a wooden dummy now, completely motionless, alright. Chu lifted a corner of her thin sweater. The moment the warm hand covered her lower abdomen, the gentle heat immediately smoothed out her furrowed brow. The warmth penetrating her skin was soothing, and an inexplicable sense of security welled up inside her. Feeling any better? Lin asked softly, noticing Chu's relaxed expression. Yes, it's quite comfortable, Chu replied, her cheeks slightly flushed. It doesn't hurt as much now. Then how about we rest until half an hour before class? Chu responded, then narrowed her eyes. Lin, also starting to zone out, leaned against the sofa behind him. His gaze drifted upward, passing through the transparent tent, tracing the exterior walls of Hogwarts Castle all the way to the cloud-dotted sky. His mind gradually emptied, sinking into a state of distraction. Bored, he began reviewing the events of the past while. He eventually thought about the changes he had observed in Harry after feeding her biscuits. This experience was quite memorable for him, as it was the first time he had helped someone without being furiously chased and beaten afterward. The changes in the Dursleys were obvious, but what surprised him most was Snape's transformation. In Lin's memory, Snape had hair so greasy it looked like it was dripping oil, a sallow, oily face, and was gloomy and damply cold, like a bat. Yet, none of these characteristics were present in Snape so far. He didn't even seem like a bat, although still enveloped by some kind of cold darkness, the overall feeling he gave off was completely different. To be honest, Lin was even looking forward to Snape's potions class. The wandlore he loved shared common ground with potions in many areas, as both subjects were branches of alchemy that studied the fusion of magic from different substances to ultimately create objects possessing magical power. Mastering potions would be a great aid to his study of wandlore. However, for Harry, the biggest impact should be that she distanced herself from the deadweight idiot and made truly beneficial friends. Lin felt nothing for Ron, especially that disgusting vibe he gave off. I'm an academic failure, so my friends must be too. It was bad enough that he lacked ambition, but dragging his good friends into being unstudious with him was excessive. Harry's grades were originally decent, but what happened? Ron dragged her everywhere to play, and even homework was just copied. Even if Harry wanted to listen to Hermione's advice, Ron eventually made her ignore it. Lin vaguely remembered that the year Ron was elected prefect, His report card didn't have a single O outstanding. Meanwhile, Harry, who fainted during the exams and missed the history of Magic Owl, still received an O outstanding rating. Passing 7 owls wasn't much. The ordinary wizarding level exams merely tested whether you possessed the most basic self-sufficiency skills required of a wizard. If Dumbledore hadn't given him massive preferential treatment, this guy absolutely wouldn't have been made prefect. Even the most playful Gryffindor boys had much better grades than Ron. It would never have been his turn. Now that Harry was far away from this guy and was instead close to Hermione, Lynn felt that his initial help was truly an act of charity. It wouldn't be excessive for Harry to call him godfather. Just as Lynn was spacing out, he thought he heard someone call his name, and the voice carried a hint of murderous intent. Immediately, a sharp pain shot through his leg, and he snapped his eyes open. Lynn Chu's face was completely red, the blush spreading to her ears, making her earlobes look so vibrant they might bleed. Hiss, what's wrong? Lynn hadn't fully recovered his senses, asking the question somewhat blankly. You. Chu gritted her teeth, her eyes glistening as if she were about to burst into tears, which instantly snapped Lynn wide awake. Oh, huh. Wait. His expression shifted rapidly, and his body involuntarily stiffened. If I told you that I was spacing out just now, and none of this was intentional, would you believe me? Lynn looked awkwardly at Chu. He had suddenly realized that the feeling in his hand was wrong. Before, it had been a soft, flat lower abdomen, but now his palm was touching firm fabric stretched into a curve. Don't cry, Chu, I apologize. I genuinely didn't mean it. I truly zoned out just now. I didn't even realize it myself. My hand had a mind of its own, and my brain had absolutely no. Lynn shut up. He knew that Chu couldn't be easily placated right now. When logic fails, provide emotional value. Actually, I was thinking about you. He spoke suddenly, resting his chin on Chu's shoulder and blowing warm, moist air near her ear. It must be tough being a girl, having those days every month when you don't feel well. Your hands are icy, your feet are icy, colder than if they were dipped in ice water. That must be really uncomfortable, right? I was just thinking. Last year, before I came, did anyone bring you a hot cup of tea on those uncomfortable days, hold your hand, and blow warm air on it to make you feel less miserable? I guess probably not. Which of those little boys would have such delicate thoughts? They barely have enough time to play. But girls should be properly protected. Your stomach doesn't hurt now, does it? Chu didn't reply for a long time. After nearly half a minute, she finally hummed a faint, Much better than before. HMPH tilde. Chu's voice was slightly louder. She moved her body a little, but seemed to lack any strength. How about I take responsibility for your uncomfortable days from now on? Pervert, I don't want that. Chu bit her lip and glared fiercely at Lynn. I truly wasn't intentional just now, I swear. There is absolutely no deception or concealment in what I'm saying, or may I have 30 days a month, every day being my egg-changing period. Chu suddenly almost burst out laughing, but the expression vanished as quickly as it appeared. Lynn had a sincere face that made people willing to trust him. If you gazed intently into his clear eyes, you might momentarily feel the illusion of plunging into their depths, touching the spring pool of his heart. That clean gaze seemed to reflect his very soul. Chu quietly held Lynn's gaze for a few seconds, then gently looked away, lowered her head slightly, and said in a very soft voice, I'll believe you this one time. But how long are you planning to keep your hand there? Suddenly, Chu looked up somewhat fiercely and shot Lynn a glare. If I said that because this was completely unintentional, that's why I only realized just now, I'll shut up now. This time, I really didn't mean it. All right, I know, Chu said, puffing out her cheeks slightly. I'll forgive you this once. But next time, I'll definitely do it on purpose. You want there to be a next time. Chu clenched her fist and waved it threateningly. Don't you want to know why? No, she pouted, avoiding looking at Lynn's face. Really don't want to know. Lynn scratched Chu's lower abdomen lightly. Stop it, that tickles tilde fine, tell me. Because even though I don't eat apples, I really like peaches. Pervert. Dirty scoundrel. We still have half an hour. Chu stopped fidgeting and leaned back gently. Half an hour, then. Lynn, are you very good at tricking girls? Why do you say that? Because today, I should have ignored a pervert like you forever. It's probably because I have good modeling and I'm handsome. Handsome people are generally more easily forgiven by girls. Shameless. Thank you, but it's not because of that. Lin looked at the flowers still blooming in the small garden outside in the autumn air. I think I might have, maybe. He extended a finger, and a small flower suddenly bloomed on its tip. Maybe I've found a bit of innocence. Or maybe I stole it from you just now. Chu's face wasn't blushing crimson anymore, but her cheeks were rosy, showing a charming smile. Her mood was quite good now, likely because her stomach ache had subsided. After walking Chu near her classroom, Lin let go of her hand, handed her the textbooks, and watched her enter. Then, Lin slowly turned and strolled toward the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom on the third floor. The timing was perfect, the class bell rang precisely as he reached the doorway. However, the pungent smell of garlic emanating from the classroom made Lin instinctively wrinkle his nose. He actually liked eating garlic, especially dishes like scallops grilled with garlic butter and vermicelli, or garlic-flavored eggplant. But the intense garlic odor radiating from Querelle was a different matter entirely. This overly thick, acrid smell made it hard to breathe and caused a physiological revulsion that bordered on nausea. Maybe I should just flip the table already. A little figure waving nunchucks yelled at him inside Lin's head. Harry isn't the same Harry anymore. Everything Dumbledore set up was meant for the male Harry, not the female Harry we have now. Harry is a good kid, she won't be wandering out late at night. The three-headed guard dog, the Chamber of Secrets, the Philosopher's Stone, the current Harry will absolutely not fall into Dumbledore's traps. It's time to change Hogwarts, and this revolution should start with Querelle. You only have 7 years to study magic here. While defense against the dark arts is utterly useless to you, instead of wasting time, you should read a couple more books and start learning how to make wands early. A future of financial freedom awaits you, it's a monopoly, after all. The little figure waving nunchucks certainly made a lot of sense, but Lin felt that acting on it would be too risky. Wah, what's wrong? Querelle stammered, suddenly feeling a sense of unease. He turned and saw Lin standing in the doorway, yet to enter. Hello, Professor Querelle. Lin's expression remained calm as he spoke and walked over to Harry. She and her close friends had kindly saved him a seat. However, Harry, Hermione, and Parvati were all wrinkling their noses, wearing expressions of utter misery. Only Hermione, who loved studying, still had some energy, the other two looked completely listless. Biological warfare was truly awful. Settling into his seat, Lin began 2 hours of torture. Querelle's stammering voice reading the textbook inflicted an indelible dual torture, both physiological and psychological. Hidden within the acrid garlic was a sickening stench, which was likely the foul odor of Voldemort rotting on the back of his head. The garlic was obviously an attempt to mask this decay. The entire lesson was filled with nonsense. Apart from the textbook passages, all they got was Querelle stumbling through meaningless small talk, such as claiming his turban was a gift from an African prince after he defeated a zombie. But when a young wizard asked how he managed to defeat the zombie, Querelle's face flushed crimson, and he vaguely changed the subject to the weather. This was, without a doubt, the worst class imaginable. History of Magic, which immediately followed Defense Against the Dark Arts, was 10,000 times more interesting. Even though Professor Binns, now a ghost, lectured in a voice that induced drowsiness, at least his content was factual and detailed. As a teacher who hadn't even realized he died and still insisted on teaching, his dedication was commendable, and he would patiently answer any questions asked. Harry, sandwiched between Hermione and Lin, hardly even dozed off during History of Magic. Being surrounded by high achievers, even though Lin was sneakily reading outside material, put considerable pressure on her, pushing her to get used to studying seriously. After the final History of Magic class of the day concluded, Lin made a firm decision. Defense Against the Dark Arts was simply atrocious. Lin found it unbearable to think about spending the next year in close proximity to that pungent garlic odor. Even if it wasn't for his own sake, Lin decided he needed to try and do something. Helping others was his passion. He wasn't seeking attention or gratitude, he was perfectly satisfied just seeing the people he helped become genuinely happy. For instance, when helping Neville, Lin sought no reward, he only hoped the little chubby boy could be happier at school, which in turn brought him happiness. The problem, however, was that while Quirrell acted like an incompetent idiot, he was actually quite capable. As an excellent Ravenclaw graduate, Quirrell's magical skill was high. With Voldemort's support, he was even able to breach the defenses of the Gringotts underground vault, a feat most wizards couldn't manage. Quirrell was not a pushover to be easily bullied or manipulated. Contrary to his demeanor, the guy was quite dangerous. Even having mastered 3 superpowers, Lynn wasn't confident he could handle him by himself. Later in the story, Quirrell would even manage to kill a unicorn. After his interactions with Hagrid, Lynn had a relatively clear idea of a unicorn's true strength. Unicorns were the undisputed rulers of the Forbidden Forest. None of the larger creatures in the woods would dare seek trouble with them. Even a solitary unicorn, when enraged, was not a warhorse that a single wizard could handle. Poachers required teamwork just to attempt a capture, and even then, they usually had to target weakened, pregnant unicorn mothers to stand a chance. Yet Quirrell killed a unicorn quite easily, using dark magic, the very thing unicorns were most resistant to. Clearly, his magical attainment was not something Lynn could easily contend with. Maybe I can strike during Halloween. A plan gradually formed in Lynn's mind. Professor Quirrell certainly looks like he needs some help. If only I could get my hands on some powerful gadget. This thought brought Lynn a slight pang of regret. His 4-dimensional garbage bag was still too lackluster. Perhaps he was just unlucky, as in over 3 years, he hadn't retrieved a single piece of future technology that was genuinely helpful. Lynn wasn't asking for the 3 divine artifacts of time, space, and causality, the time machine, the anywhere door, or the what-if telephone booth. If he just had a tool like the power pickaxe, which Doraemon uses for digging, he'd have the power to smash Quirrell with a single blow. That heavy pickaxe, hitting with 100 times the force, would be no less effective than a direct hammer strike from Hagrid. If he had something even better, like the power gloves, a few hundred times increase in strength would let Lynn blow Quirrell's body apart with a single punch. And yet, these kinds of gadgets are so minor in Doraemon that people barely remember their names. If only I could get the future department store communicator. If I could buy gadgets directly, I don't know how powerful I could become. Sigh. Lynn, what are you sighing about? Harry poked his elbow curiously, having watched Lynn zone out for a long time before suddenly sighing. Nothing much. Just the thought of having to listen to Quirrell's nonsense and smell that disgusting garlic odor for the whole year makes me feel physically ill. Oh, right. Harry nodded, then leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, Lynn, I think I got my period. Your period started. Lynn didn't even bat an eye. Then drink plenty of hot water, avoid anything cold, and don't touch cold water. Is that all? Why don't you ask Hermione? She probably knows more than I do. Don't you find it strange, though? Harry whispered. What's strange about it? You're a girl, Lynn said, spreading his hands. Having all the things you should have is perfectly normal, isn't it? Given that future technology could create items that manipulate causality, Lynn had absolutely no doubt it could achieve this. What was more unbelievable than a phone call changing the world? Furthermore, Doraemon had more than one causality-altering gadget like the what-if telephone booth, which was truly remarkable. You take it easy for a while. I'm going to find Chu, she hasn't been feeling well these past few days either. Wow. You're so biased. I'm your good friend too. You already have 2 girlfriends, isn't that enough? Chu is mine too, and she was my first girlfriend, Harry huffed, putting her hands on her hips. You can't look after her all the time anyway. I'll help you take care of her, so don't worry about it. Lynn rubbed Harry's head, put his hands in his pockets, and strolled leisurely away. Compared to Charms and Transfiguration, Professor Sprout's herbology class wasn't nearly as exciting. Because of the inherent dangers of magical plants, the first few lessons after term began were purely theoretical, covering topics like how to identify common versus magical flora, and which poisonous magical plants were most commonly encountered. With the lack of practical lessons, the young wizards' dream of taking their little trowels and digging in the large gardens remained just that, a dream. But there was no need to rush. Herbology wasn't the only way to interact with magical flora. With the arrival of Friday, the first-year Gryffindors faced their long-awaited, scratch that, anxiously anticipated potions class. Severus Snape was notorious at Hogwarts, though this reputation was far from pleasant, especially among Gryffindor students. Attending Snape's lessons was always a significant challenge. If they managed to lose fewer than 5 points in potions class on any given day, that day was certainly cause for celebration. If, by some miracle, no one was scolded, oh, that was something the young Gryffindors didn't dare dream of. 0 multiplied by anything is still 0. This was an objective law that would not change. Potions class was taught in an underground classroom, which was much colder than the main castle structure. The dungeons of Hogwarts Castle had historically served as actual dungeons. The castle itself was originally Salazar Slytherin's family stronghold, which he contributed as the school site when the 4 founders established Hogwarts. After a millennium, even the most malevolent spirits that once dwelled here had dissipated with time. However, upon entering the subterranean levels, the intense cold still pierced through robes and chilled the body. The damp environment amplified this unpleasant sensation, making everyone yearn to return immediately to the sunlit grounds, even if the September sun was losing its warmth. Following the eerie green glow of the dungeon corridor, the young wizards entered a narrow passage connecting the hall to the classroom. Shelves lined both sides of the passage, holding jars filled with various limbs and organs of unknown creatures, soaking in a sickly green liquid cast by the light. They slowly bobbed in the solution, appearing to harbor the lingering malice from the day they were dismembered, ready to claim a soul. Every young wizard entering the potions classroom kept their lips tightly pressed and their bodies stiff. Any sudden, unexpected noise could startle them into jumping straight up and hitting the ceiling. Even the little snakes of Slytherin were unnerved by this classroom. While the decor of the Slytherin common room might be dark, it was still designed for rest and relaxation and maintained some restraint. This classroom, however, showed absolutely no such consideration. With only 2 minutes remaining before the start of potions class, all students were seated. Gryffindor shared potions with Slytherin, but even the conceited Draco Malfoy, who usually looked down on everyone, had no thought of starting trouble right now. He merely stared at Lynn's back in front of him, slowly turning over his long-contemplated revenge plan in his mind. He intended to settle the score and thoroughly humiliate Lynn, but the moment wasn't right, it wasn't time to act yet. In the midst of the oppressive silence, a faint, cold draft swept into the room as the wooden classroom door creaked open. A tall, dark silhouette entered, accompanied by a blast of icy air. In that instant, the temperature in the classroom seemed to plummet by more than 10 degrees. The chilling wind billowed Snape's robes and lifted strands of his black hair. His deep eyes, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, swept across the room like a pair of abyssal depths capable of swallowing all vitality, instantly consuming the already sparse life force within the classroom. He stopped precisely on the boundary line between the specimen corridor and the main classroom. Half his face was shrouded in shadow, revealing only his thin lips, which were etched with utter coldness. Undoubtedly, when those lips parted, they would utter frost capable of freezing body and soul, concealing deadly serpentine venom. Silence. Snape's voice clearly reached every ear, sounding as though the mere beating of their hearts was disturbing him. The young wizard's breathing ceased momentarily. Roll call now. Snape glided like a ghost to the lectern and drew out a piece of parchment that resembled the King of Hell's register of life and death. When your name was spoken, your time had come. Every young wizard who survived the roll call involuntarily sagged slightly. The sheer adrenaline rush of this tightrope walk with death left their minds blank for a moment, before they immediately tensed their nerves again, praying this was their last such encounter. Harry Potter. When Harry's name was called, Snape, surprisingly, did not linger, even quickening his pace slightly. His eyes were faintly narrowed. Lynn vaguely sensed that Snape was deliberately controlling his gaze to avoid excessive contact with Harry. Perhaps a glance would involuntarily trigger a memory, and that was something he was unwilling to display in front of his students. However, when the name, Lynn, left his mouth, Snape's voice paused slightly. A chilling expression seemed to cross his perpetually icy face, like a venomous snake suddenly revealing its sharp fangs after flicking its tongue. This instantaneous shift in tone caught everyone completely off guard. I have heard your name mentioned by several professors. You possess a photographic memory, outstanding talent in transfiguration, and first-rate control over magic. Your thought process is far more meticulous than your classmates, and you even possess the quiet heart necessary to endure tedium and deeply research magic. None of the words Snape uttered were derogatory. In fact, he appeared to hold Lynn in high regard. The Slytherin students' faces changed slightly, especially Draco Malfoy, who looked utterly disgusted, as if he had just been forced to swallow something foul. But the more this happened, the more uneasy Lynn felt. Snape isn't following the script, Lynn griped internally. He should be tearing me down the moment he opens his mouth, then subjecting me to endless challenges. After I fight my way through and prove myself, humiliating him and showing off like a typical novel protagonist, I should then be worshipped by my classmates as a savior. This plot is fundamentally flawed. You are very well suited for the study of potions, Snape continued. You possess the innate talent to become an excellent potions master, if you are truly as the other professors have assessed. Snape paused again. I look forward to your performance. He gave Lynn a deep look, then called out the next name. Ronald Weasley. Ron, whose face was inexplicably flushed, nervously raised his hand. You are supposed to answer, present. Snape's face turned cold, or rather, returned to its original state. Gryffindor, -1 point. If anyone is unwilling to speak up, the next deduction will be 5 points. Ron's face went deathly pale, and his body slumped onto his chair, looking utterly defeated. Before long, the roll call concluded, and Snape put away the parchment. Now then, you should know why you are here. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making. Snape's voice was barely above a whisper, yet in the intensely silent classroom, every student could hear him clearly. As there is little foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will truly appreciate the sheer beauty of the softly simmering cauldron, with its shimmering fumes and wafting fragrances, nor will you truly understand the magical power of liquids that flow through human veins, bewitching the mind and ensnaring the senses. His long, slender fingers gently kneaded the air, as if grasping the white smoke rising from a cauldron and winding it around his fingertips. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even stopper death, provided, of course, that you are not the usual collection of dunderheads I am frequently forced to encounter. Now then, Lynn. While Snape was taking roll call, Lynn internally muttered, just as I suspected. If I provide you with the following ingredients, what is the maximum number of distinct potion recipes you can assemble from them? Snape drew his wand and gave it a flick. Dozens of magical ingredients, complete with their quantities and weights, swiftly appeared on the blackboard behind him. Upon seeing such a difficult question, the young wizards in the classroom were stunned, and their eyes involuntarily fell upon Lynn. Yes, Professor. Lynn stood up and walked to the blackboard. After quickly scanning the listed contents, he began writing rapidly on the blank section of the board. The ingredients listed were common components for potions, but because the quantities were specified, it was actually quite difficult to logically separate and combine them into complete recipes. Even if the variety of ingredients was sufficient, the specified amounts might not be enough to break down and recombine into the required dosages for several different potions. But just as Snape had mentioned earlier, Lynn did possess a photographic memory. He had already memorized every potion recipe recorded in the textbook, along with the precise material quantities required for each. The scratching sound of the quill was continuous and unbroken. After about a minute and a half, Lynn put down his quill and stepped away from the blackboard. Written densely on the board were various potion recipes, their brewing procedures, and the precise dosages of the ingredients, all clear, concise, and neatly organized. I could only find these recipes, Professor Snape. Lynn returned to his seat, looking calmly at Snape. Cure for boils, calming draft, forgetfulness potion. Snape scanned Lynn's answers. You could only find 3. Yes, Professor. If you disassemble the ingredients required for the calming draft and combine them with the remaining ingredients, you will obtain the components necessary for a wakefulness potion and a sleeping potion. Snape flicked his wand, and 2 new lines of writing appeared beneath Lynn's answers. The ingredients Snape provided could be assembled into a maximum of these 4 potion recipes. Although Lynn had fallen into the trap Snape designed within the question, he showed no sign of mockery or frustration, merely nodding calmly. Your efforts are currently insufficient. Sit down. Yes, Professor. Lynn sat down upon hearing this, displaying neither arrogance nor resentment. Snape was not attempting to humiliate him, he was testing him. Now, why aren't you noting down the recipe for the cure for boils? Snape suddenly addressed the other students. Today, we shall be studying the cure for boils, and the complete brewing process is already written on the blackboard. A flurry of panicked noises erupted in the classroom as the young wizards hastily pulled out their quills and began copying the notes onto their parchment. The high-pressure class resumed, and during the practical session of potion brewing, Snape patrolled the classroom, pointing out flaws in almost every student. Your Professor McGonagall says transfiguration requires patience. It seems she's used all her patience enduring your stupidity. Weasley, tell me, if I stirred your brain in a cauldron, would you realize you're stirring in the wrong direction? I don't know. Ron, questioned by Snape, panicked at that moment. He stammered, his face pale. Even if you don't have a brain, you shouldn't be blind. Gryffindor, 1 point deducted. Longbottom. After chastising Ron, his gaze shifted to the side, looking at Neville. If I were you, I'd check the brewing recipe again. You need to take the cauldron off the fire before adding the porcupine quills, Hermione whispered to Neville, whose seat was next to hers. Perhaps you should have reminded him earlier, Miss Granger. True intelligence isn't about being wise after the event. Perhaps you hoped to see his cauldron explode and the potion splash on your face. Gryffindor, 2 points deducted. 1 for Longbottom's stupidity, and 1 for your ill-timed arrogance. Watching the Gryffindors, who were almost driven to tears by Snape, the little snakes of Slytherin showed schadenfreude in their eyes. Although they weren't doing much better, they hadn't lost any points. Some even received bonus points for good performance, like Draco Malfoy, who was praised and awarded points for handling the horned slugs. Professor, a soft inquiry suddenly came from the classroom, is it better to grind snake fangs into powder or use them in granular form? Snape turned around instantly, then spoke calmly, grind them into a fine powder, Hallie. Thank you, Professor, Hallie said with a sweet smile. Perhaps you should learn to ask questions promptly when you don't understand. Snape's voice was cold, but it seemed to have a little more warmth than before. 5 points to Hallie. Then, Seamus's question had just begun when Snape's icy glare fell upon him. You should address me as Professor, before asking a question, Mr. Finnegan. Gryffindor, 1 point deducted. Seamus shut up, dumbfounded. He suddenly realized the gap between people was even wider than the gap between humans and dogs. Finally, when class was dismissed, the relieved students felt their backs drenched in cold sweat, especially the Gryffindor students near Hallie. Any slight mistake would earn them Snape's terrifying icy gaze, and even Hermione's hands trembled from nervousness. Fortunately, none of them had any experimental accidents like exploding cauldrons. I don't expect you to learn to truly use your brains to study. I only hope that before you act, you think it through. Look at your potions, what's the difference between them and dishwater? After inspecting everyone's potions, Snape spoke coldly, how many of them can be considered acceptable? As he returned to the podium, he paused briefly beside Hallie, glanced down, and said, not bad, at least it looks more like a proper potion than that dishwater. 5 points to Hallie. I hope you will carefully check every step, and at least not treat your eyes as mere decorations. Class dismissed. Lynn, stay behind. Seamus, Dean, and Neville gave Lynn sympathetic looks, as if to say, good luck, we'll save you some dinner, and then quickly left the potions classroom with the other students. You and Hermione go to the Great Hall. Don't wait for me, Lynn said to Hallie while tidying his desk. Okay, I'll save you a seat. Come quickly, Lynn. Hallie nodded, then left the classroom with Hermione and Padma. Soon, the classroom was empty. Snape sat in the chair at the podium, and Lynn stepped forward. Is there something you need, Professor Snape? Potions weren't difficult for Lynn, truly not difficult. He remembered the brewing recipes and the order of ingredients clearly, and the most crucial part of potion brewing, blending, was his strong suit. His control over magic was excellent, far surpassing that of his peers. Precisely controlling the fusion of ingredients in the cauldron was key to a potion's quality. If a perfect potion was a 10 out of 10, Lynn's first attempt at a boil cure potion would probably score above 9. Hallie, who was praised by Snape, her potion would be about an 8. After all, Lynn was there to guide her at any time, and she could directly ask Snape about anything uncertain. Achieving this score was simple. Hallie's talent was not bad. Your performance is acceptable. Snape didn't immediately pressure or suppress Lynn, instead, he affirmed his ability. For him to say, acceptable, actually meant, quite good, especially considering Lynn was a Gryffindor student. Compared to those fools and idiots, you are one of the few who can use their brains to learn. Hogwarts will co-host some project competitions with other magic schools, allowing excellent students to compete with students from other schools, such as the annual Potions Championship, which Hogwarts will co-host with schools like Castellobruxo, Ilvermorny, and Koldovstorts. Generally, students recommended to compete are in their 5th year or above, but there have been precedents of younger students participating. Lynn nodded slightly. It was normal for Hogwarts to have these competitions. As an internationally renowned magic school, it would be unusual if Hogwarts remained in a state of closed-door isolation. However, Lynn still had some concerns about this competition. If I decide to participate in this competition, do I need to start preparing now? Yes, Snape nodded. Will it be very busy, Professor? If you think you can casually learn and compete with excellent students from other magic schools. Snape's lips curled into a cold sneer. Oh, I understand, Professor. Lynn naturally guessed the unspoken latter half of Snape's sentence. Snape seemed to want to keep him busy, or rather, lure him in and then, kill him. Moreover, one should not be complacent in life. There are many geniuses in the world, and even if they don't all grow up to be successful in the future, when their talents burst forth, they should never be underestimated. Even ephemeral talent is exquisitely beautiful when it blooms. I decline, Professor. I decline to participate in the upcoming Potions Championship. Lynn gave his answer decisively. He had probably guessed some of Snape's intentions. Please forgive my presumption, and please take a moment to hear my thoughts. Lynn quickly spoke, interrupting Snape's impending words. His posture and tone were sincere and polite, which made Snape nod somewhat reluctantly. Compared to potions, I personally prefer to spend my time on wandlore, which I find more interesting. In the 2 months from the holidays until now, I have been continuously working hard to formally study wandlore. Mr. Ollivander has provided me with great help, and he is also willing to sponsor and assist me on this profound path that will require my entire life to explore and research. For this, I am very grateful for everything he has done for me, and I also hope that I can reciprocate his help and make some small contributions to wandlore in the future. A person's energy is limited. After deciding to research wandlore, it's difficult for me to find enough time and energy to delve deeply into potions, as it is also a profound discipline. However, besides me, there are other students with good talent in potions, aren't there? Lynn's gaze fell on Snape's face. Like Hallie, her performance today was very good, wasn't it? Snape's expression remained unchanged, even though he inwardly agreed with the statement. Hallie's talent was indeed good. Not only did she resemble her mother in appearance, but in her aptitude for magic, she also showed the same promise Lily had when she first came to school. However, I've always had a question I wanted to ask Professor Snape. Do you really know Hallie's mother? Were you good friends with her? Do I need to explain this to you? Snape's brow furrowed slightly, and his tone turned cold. I believe an explanation is necessary. Otherwise, as Hallie's good friend, I believe I should report to Professor Dumbledore, to get a definitive answer from him, on whether you, Professor Snape, are a pedophile. Snape instantly stood up, his robes billowing without a breeze, like a dark curtain of undead rising from the horizon, engulfing the sky. I know very well what someone's gaze is like when they see someone they like in front of them. That one time, the way you looked at Hallie was quite offensive and rude, wasn't it, Professor Snape? Lynn's expression didn't waver. He looked at Snape coldly. If you hadn't called out, Lily, instead of Hallie, at that moment, perhaps you, Professor, would have already had a heart-to-heart talk with Headmaster Dumbledore. So, I want to confirm with you here, Professor, are you Hallie's mother, Lily's good friend? Lynn's calm voice rang in Snape's ears like a mighty bell, momentarily blanking his mind. Or rather, Professor, you should assure me that you love Hallie's mother, not Hallie, and that you are not treating Hallie as a replacement for her mother, projecting your affection for her onto Hallie. She's only 11 years old, Professor. Some things cannot be done, not even thought of. You're slandering me. Snape exploded in anger at that instant, but he couldn't lash out at Lynn because of it, otherwise it would be like mud falling into one's pants. Whether it's excrement or not, it would be seen as such. Is that so? Lynn suddenly smiled. Perhaps I should ask Headmaster Dumbledore for confirmation and an answer. Lynn turned and walked away without the slightest hesitation. Just as he took his third step, Snape's cold, gritted voice came from behind him. Stop. I'm listening, Professor Snape. Lynn slowly turned to face Snape. The answer you want is right here. Snape slowly reached into his robe pocket, then slowly pulled out a yellowed old photograph and turned it over. It wasn't a moving magical photograph, but a muggle photo of a beautiful girl sitting on a swing. Young Lily and Hallie were strikingly similar, almost identical. After the photo was flipped, its back had a torn fragment of a letter, clearly showing Lily's signature. Hallie's mother and I knew each other before coming to Hogwarts. We were. Snape closed his eyes slightly. We were very good friends once. Just like you and Hallie. Snape's voice had a hint of wistfulness as he spoke, as if he had fallen into a memory. I understand, Professor. Lynn nodded, having received the answer he wanted. I'll keep your secret. However, since it was a misunderstanding, please forgive my offense. I apologize, Professor. Hallie is my good friend, and I have an obligation to protect my friends. Snape didn't reply, only nodded slightly. But at the same time, perhaps I can give you a small report. After all, Professor, you are the head of Slytherin House, and you should decide whether to punish some offensive things done by Slytherin students. Someone told Hallie, you stinking mudblood. Although I taught him a small lesson at the time, I'm not sure if it will make him remember the lesson and not do it again. Snape's eyes turned red in that instant. Who? He hissed coldly, like a venomous snake. Draco Malfoy. You may leave. Snape waved his hand, and the sleeve of his robe fanned a cold gust of wind. Perhaps we should be glad that the potion class is followed by the weekend. The 2 days off mean the young witches and wizards hardly have to meet the professors. When Lynn ran into Draco in the Great Hall, a hint of pity flickered in his eyes. Though snitching isn't ideal, Lynn really didn't want to waste time on Draco. From the way this guy looked at him, Lynn could tell he was planning mischief. Rather than playing house with him, it would be better to let Snape take the lead. This made Draco glare at Lynn with resentment, and an inexplicable unease rose in his heart. He didn't know why, but he felt a looming disaster and instinctively tugged at his waistband. Even though he had fastened his pants with a belt, Draco still couldn't easily relax. The social death on the first day of school left him barely speaking to anyone after enrollment, let alone bragging to classmates. Draco's school life isn't going very well. But Lynn has no such worries. Gryffindor is a house where it's easy to make friends, the little lions are cheerful and enthusiastic, and the common room is often filled with laughter. After the first week of term studies, the first weekend of September was especially enjoyable for the students. The Great Hall was noisy, and the Gryffindor tables were especially lively. The Weasley twins sat opposite Lynn and Harley. The inseparable brothers are Gryffindor's most beloved jokers and also the beaters for Gryffindor's Quidditch team, enjoying great popularity. Good afternoon, Lynn and Harley. As they sat down, the twins giggled and greeted Lynn and Harley. I've heard about you too, well done. What did we do? Lynn looked at the twins with some confusion, not really understanding what they meant. Look over there. The twins pointed at a wall in the Great Hall and said, did you see the hourglass? It's showing a positive number now. Since Bill started at Hogwarts, Gryffindor's score has never been positive in the first week of term. Last year was terrible. Someone blew up a crucible in Snape's potion class, splashing his robe, and the house lost a full 20 points. By this day last year, Gryffindor's hourglass still owed over 30 gems. Did you know, Harley, you've made a legend, the twins exclaimed dramatically. Getting extra points in Snape's class is more shocking than Professor McGonagall inviting first-years to her club. Even though Harley got extra points in Snape's class, I don't think I was invited to Professor McGonagall's club, right? Seeing Lynn's puzzled expression, the twins exchanged a glance and burst into laughter. But Professor McGonagall told us in Friday's class. Fred cleared his throat, then pinched his throat to mimic Professor McGonagall's voice, adopting a serious expression. You're already third-year students. I can't accept that after a summer you've forgotten how to properly turn a mouse into a teacup. That's the most basic living transformation. Your first-year juniors have already mastered this technique. I don't expect you to turn a mouse into a cup with no trace of biological features, but at least your teacups shouldn't have tails or squeak and run around the table. I don't want your juniors taking your Hogwarts spots in the upcoming Transfiguration League. After Fred finished, George spread his hands and said, then we'll happily receive the second week quiz. If we fail, someone will have to help Professor Sprout manually stir fertilizer. Trust me, that punishment will keep you from eating for a whole week. Transfiguration League. Yes, yes. In competitions with other schools, selected students join the professors, clubs, transfiguration, potions, charms are always included. Herbology contests are less frequent, about every 2 or 3 years, because Kasuchubu is too far from Hogwarts, they prefer to compete with Ifamoni. But speaking of that, the quadrennial Triwizard Tournament is the real fun. Last year it was held at Dumstrang, where Charlie wiped them out. The final round involved battling a gigantic horse-shaped water monster to seize the gold cup it guarded. That beast was enormous, over 10 times larger than anything in the Black Lake. Charlie said that in its horse form it was 7 or 8 stories tall. Triwizard Tournament. Hearing that, Lynn was instantly shocked. Yeah, it's normal you haven't heard of it. It's a centuries-old competition among Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, and Dumstrang. It was banned for a time, but revived 100 years ago after a Hogwarts senior, after graduation, beat wizards across Europe, giving Hogwarts great prestige, and the Triwizard Tournament was reinstated. A Hogwarts senior. The more Lynn listened, the more something felt familiar, yet he just couldn't recall. He's a legendary figure. Supposedly he transferred into Hogwarts at 15 to join the 5th year, and within a year single-handedly thwarted the Third Goblin Rebellion, killing its leader Lanlock. That's just his most modest achievement. Mentioning this legendary senior instantly energized the twins. Our great-grandmother was the deputy headmistress of Hogwarts and witnessed it all. At that time, the wizarding world had a poaching gang called the Fire Ash Snake Party, very powerful and rampant. The Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts was practically their base, black markets were everywhere, and the scent of blood even drifted outside the woods. Yet within a little over 2 years after his enrollment, the senior wiped out the Fire Ash Snake Party almost single-handedly. Even after graduating, he kept targeting such poaching groups, stirring bloodshed across Europe, from Europa to Aphalaga. The square of Wagadu Magic School even has a statue of him, honoring his outstanding contributions to protecting magical creatures. Some tried to label him a dark wizard, but how could they? He's a hero who came out of Gryffindor. Though his Avada lightning chain is terrifying, one spell can wipe out a whole area, but that doesn't stop him from marching boldly on the path of justice. Lynn fell silent, he finally understood what this legendary senior truly was. The inheritor of ancient magic, the chosen one favored by the Phoenix, the fourth calamity walking in reality, Voldemort was a mere nobody in front of him, not even worthy of carrying his shoes. Avada. Chain lightning. Is that the killing curse? Holly asked, slightly startled. Isn't that an unforgivable curse? Back then, no one cared, the Ministry of Magic probably had to kneel and thank him, Fred shrugged. But because of that senior student, after he left England to travel the world, the Ministry of Magic strictly banned the use of the killing curse, giving the curse a huge side effect. It means that if you use it, you have to go rot in Azkaban, George chimed in. But honestly, rules like that only restrict the wizards who wouldn't use the killing curse anyway. Forget about regulating dark wizards, Aurors even have exemption clauses allowing them to use it during missions. You can't expect them to only use Expelliarmus or Stupefy to subdue treacherous dark wizards, Holly. That's true, Holly nodded. Even police officers carry guns, how can they catch criminals without weapons? So, is this senior student still alive? Lynn asked the twins, curious, after managing to swallow his surprise. I believe so. Although we haven't heard news of that senior student appearing anywhere for a long time, he's only a few years older than Professor Dumbledore. Our headmaster is still healthy enough to dance the Lindy Hop at the Triwizard Tournament ball, so how could our legendary alumnus die young? Oh, right, Lynn, are you interested in joining us to research something interesting? Fred smoothly changed the subject, looking at Lynn with a grin. Charlie gave us a bit of the Champions Prize money as seed money for shares. We plan to research some fun prank products, the kind that are even better than what Zonko's joke shop sells. We really need a partner with outstanding transfiguration skills. We originally wanted to ask Cedric, but he wasn't interested. But you might end up being even better than Cedric, so how about coming to play around with us? Is that the shop that sells pepper imps? Holly suddenly recalled her shopping trip in Diagon Alley. That shop really has a lot of interesting things. Exactly, but our goal is to surpass it. To grow bigger, become stronger, and create glory. The twins declared, one after the other, their eyes shining with ambition. That sounds really interesting, Lynn. Holly looked at Lynn with sparkling eyes and tugged on his sleeve. I plan to study wandlore later. Lynn paused slightly before agreeing. But perhaps I can find some inspiration from you too. Aha! The twins high-fived. That's the best news possible. But we won't rush things, honestly, we still have a lot to learn. Even though it's just a makeshift operation right now, we're definitely going to make this happen. Welcome aboard, mate, you definitely won't regret it. What about me? What can I do? Holly asked, looking eager, but she quickly pursed her lips in slight dejection. I don't think I have a brain as good as Lynn's. How about? Holly blinked, looking at the twins with bright eyes. I contribute some galleons for your research funds. Like Charlie's investment. To receive approval from such a lovely, beautiful, and intelligent lady. A flash of excitement crossed Fred and George's faces, and they spoke animatedly. This is a tremendous honor for us. It's actually because of Lynn. Holly stuck out her tongue, slightly embarrassed. I believe he's definitely capable. So, how much should I invest? 1,000, would 2,000 galleons be enough? The twins were dumbfounded by this rich lady comment. They had thought it would be generous if Holly offered 100 galleons for investment, but the figure they heard had an extra zero. Actually, Charlie only gave us 200 galleons as startup capital. The twins looked at Holly awkwardly. That's far too much, Holly. While we do want investment, still. Then 2,000 it is. But to withdraw the money, I'll have to wait until the holidays to go to Gringotts. I only have a few hundred on me right now. Holly, who is not very sensitive about money, checked her small purse. How about I give you 500 first, if you need the money now? No, we don't need it right now. The twins waved their hands emphatically. Though they were pranksters, they were still good kids. Please don't tell anyone else you brought that much money to school. What if someone, Holly? That's a massive amount of money. Is that a lot? Holly glanced at Lynn, not quite understanding. She had spent more than that just buying things in Diagon Alley previously. The inheritance her parents left her was a colossal fortune of millions of galleons that Holly couldn't possibly spend in her lifetime, a small mountain of gold piled 2 or 3 times as high as Hagrid. I currently have 26 galleons and 5 sickles left in my pocket, and my wallet is fatter than most students. What do you think, Holly? Lynn tapped Holly's head lightly. Put your wallet away carefully, don't lose it. Then you hold onto it. I'll ask you for it when I need it. Holly shoved the small purse into Lynn's hand and patted her chest as if relieved. I feel much safer having it with you. Oh, and Lynn, if you need to buy anything, just use my money, don't be shy. So, am I being kept now? Lynn looked at Holly with a strange expression. In your dreams. But you can spend the money freely, you don't need to consult me. In Holly's heart, she always felt she should repay Lynn. Although she had been uncomfortable with her new status initially, as her life improved, she was growing more accustomed to her identity. However, when it came to repayment, she realized she had little else to offer besides mountains of gold galleons. Alright, you two take your time eating. I'm going to find Hermione and Lavender. Bye Tilda. Holly put down her knife and fork, wiped her mouth, and cheerfully got up and left. After she left, the twins looked at Lynn with teasing eyes. Holly seems to really Lee. It's trust, Lynn interrupted the twins. Holly and I are good friends, and that's all we'll ever be. A touching friendship. Then long live friendship. They raised their cups of pumpkin juice and clinked them against Lynn's. By the way, are there any good ways to make some money right now? Lynn touched his meager wallet, looked up at the twins, and asked, I'm pretty short on cash right now. Why, of course. The twins chuckled. Of course there are, but this isn't the place to discuss it. Come on, let's go somewhere else to chat. As the resident experts of Hogwarts, proficient in all the secret passages and deeply knowledgeable about these unconventional routes, the Weasley twins truly pointed Lynn toward a clear path. There were plenty of ways to earn money, it just required a little time to get started. The twins had connections in Hogsmeade. As masters of frugality who could stretch a single canute into two, the brothers had naturally found places where they could purchase the materials they needed at a discount to save as much research funding as possible. The Hogshead Inn in Hogsmeade was where those who dealt in illegal goods frequently gathered. They didn't just sell, they bought as well. This was the easiest and most convenient route the twins had for making money, but to extract galleons from those seasoned black marketeers, the most crucial thing was having genuine skill, such as a special talent for brewing potions. Although Snape, the potions professor, was a bona fide potions master, not many people genuinely learned the true craft from him. Out of over 100 students in a single year, no more than 15% would be eligible to take his advanced potions class in their 6th year. Once students left school, if their careers didn't involve brewing, they would completely forget everything they had learned within 2 or 3 years. Their student years were, ironically, the period when their knowledge was most profound and their abilities most comprehensive. However, the potions brewed by young wizards in class were confiscated by Snape, and few people bothered with brewing during the holidays. In the wizarding world, potions were a consistently marketable commodity. Selling through the Hogshead Inn was indeed an excellent option for Lynn. Although I probably don't have time to attempt the best-selling Polyjuice potion right now, the Draft of Living Death is easy enough to manage, and so is the Energy Potion. While the profit margin on the Energy Potion is a bit low, it has high demand and brews quickly. I can finish a cauldron in about an hour, yielding 5 or 6 bottles. A small profit of 3 sickles per bottle means I can earn a galleon per batch. Isn't that better money than working for the Ministry of Magic? Lynn, finally relieved that he wouldn't have to worry about affording a birthday gift in the autumn, was quite satisfied. After entering the dormitory, he closed the door, walked to his bed, and took out his fourth-dimensional pocket. The cloth bag had extremely high durability, showing no signs of wear, and its elasticity was excellent. No matter how large an item was, as long as he could lift it, he could shove it inside. Calculating the time, it was nearly the day for the magical items to refresh. Lynn skillfully opened the pocket, poked his head in, and then completely slipped inside. The fourth-dimensional pocket vanished into thin air, only to reappear when he crawled back out. Before him was a chaotic darkness, yet it wasn't so dim that he couldn't see his surroundings. It was like walking into a room during the day with the curtains drawn, faint and murky. He had no idea how large the space inside the pocket was. Lynn had tried to explore the area before, but no matter how far he walked, he could never reach the end. However, the moment he turned to go back, his very next step would land him directly at the entrance. Near the entrance, Lynn had set up several shelving units where he stored the magical gadgets he had accumulated over time. Half of them were still bamboo copters, making the collection look rather embarrassingly meager. I hope this time it doesn't refresh as another bamboo copter. Lynn's gaze swept around the area. The new gadgets weren't hard to find, although the space inside the fourth-dimensional pocket was enormous. A kind of intuitive foresight allowed him to know the direction of the new items. After offering a quick prayer, he lightly lifted his body using telekinesis and zipped forward. In less than half a minute, vibrant colors appeared in the darkness ahead. He reached out and snatched the object floating in midair. Good luck. There are actually 2 items. His eyes widened when he saw something resembling a flashlight appear in his hand. Could this be the legendary, shrinking? Fine, I won't get my hopes up. After just 1 second of excitement, Lynn extinguished his wild fantasy. The shrinking light wouldn't show up that easily. Anyway, as long as it's not a bamboo copter, I'm happy. The moment he grabbed the gadgets, Lynn instantly knew their names and effects. Although he didn't have a diagnostic spell, the complete instruction manual appeared in his mind the second he touched them. The flashlight that looked somewhat like the shrinking light was actually the fantasy light, a magical gadget capable of projecting imagined scenes using light. Nobita once used this gadget to play a prank, imagining a mouse and giving Doraemon a massive scare. The other gadget, however, was a bit pathetic. To be honest, when Lynn first held it, he really didn't know what use the thing had. It was flavor-sharing gum. If you broke it apart and gave pieces to different people, the person who took the first bite of the gum could share the taste of their food with the others. The effect lasted for 24 hours. If someone needed to lose weight, they could use this gum to alleviate their cravings, tasting delicious food without the fear of gaining weight. If I ate a piece, and then went to taste what a girl's lipstick tasted like, wouldn't that let someone else get a free taste? Thinking about it that way, maybe it does have some use. Looking at the partially opened box of flavor-sharing gum in his hand, Lin gave himself a thumbs up for his cleverness. If he ever encountered a truly pathetic simp who couldn't get what he wanted, perhaps he could share a piece with him. He'd first break off a piece for the goddess's boyfriend to chew. If the simp was lucky, he might even get to taste seafood, and maybe he'd be even more motivated to simp for the goddess afterward. I truly am a clever, great person. Lin applauded himself, even feeling an impulse to go find a simp right now and help him out. But why is one piece already opened and broken in half? What a shame. Taking the opened piece of gum out of the box and tucking it into his pocket, Lin placed the two newly acquired gadgets onto the shelving unit. Once an item was retrieved, it would no longer disappear. When he crawled out of the fourth-dimensional pocket, the dormitory was still empty. His roommates were likely off having fun somewhere. There were still many things to do on the first weekend after the term started. Maybe I should go to Hagrid's now and ask him where I can harvest grass bellworms and jumping toadstools. Both are common and used in large amounts, and buying them with money feels a bit uneconomical. Lin, whose pockets were currently rather bare, had no intention of spending Harry's money. Since he had the ability to earn his own, it was better to be self-reliant. After all, that's how he had managed for so many years. Oh, right, I forgot to give Hagrid the hot pot recipe last time. I should write a copy for him. Walking over to the small desk in the dormitory, Lin pulled a crumpled piece of parchment from his pocket. After spreading it out, he quickly scribbled down the recipe with his quill. The piece of gum he had casually shoved into his pocket fell out, the portion with the half wrapper landing unnoticed on the armchair. Putting away the parchment, Lin left the room with light steps. He quickly descended from the room of requirement. Hagrid's cabin lay at the edge of the lawn ahead. Shortly after Lin left, the dormitory door opened, and a beaming Ron returned. He was smacking his lips, savoring the joy of his recent victory. After playing several games of wizard chess that morning, Ron, who had dominated the board, was so happy he had devoured 2 extra chicken legs at lunch. Feeling slightly stuffed, he just wanted a peaceful afternoon nap. Once he woke up, it would be time for the Gryffindor chess master to re-emerge. What's this? As he sat down on his bed, Ron spotted the half piece of gum lying on the armchair. Having never seen such a thing before, Ron curiously picked it up. The writing on the wrapper was in English, so he had no trouble reading it. Is it some new kind of candy? Ron held the gum, examining it for a while, then happily raised an eyebrow. Today really is my lucky day. I'll share a bit with you too. Ron pulled his grubby, fat rat, Scabbers, out of his pocket. As the owner, Ron actually cared about Scabbers, even if he complained about him. However, whether a rat could chew gum was a question that fell entirely outside the scope of his thought process. He quickly tore off the wrapper and popped the item into his mouth. But after chewing for a while, the thing had absolutely no taste, slightly dampening Ron's happy mood. Something this disgusting, no wonder someone threw away half a piece. Tui tilde. Woof. 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 Just as he reached the outside of the hut, Fang's excited barking could be heard. Hagrid, I'm here. Lin knocked on the door of Hagrid's hut, and after a moment, Hagrid opened it with a beaming smile. Ah, Lin, you've come at the perfect time. I just got some spices from the centaurs and was about to write you a letter to come and get them. Didn't Hallie come? Hallie went to find Hermione and Parvati. They might be in the library right now. I forgot to give you the hot pot recipe last time. Here, I wrote it down on parchment. As Lin pulled the parchment out of his pocket, the broken piece of chewing gum fell out with it. Fang, who was wagging his tail nearby, was quick as a flash and immediately snatched it up and ate it. Fang, don't eat random things. Lin grabbed Fang's head and rubbed it vigorously. That was chewing gum. Don't just eat anything. Woof woo tilde. Fang wagged his tail, but by the time he opened his mouth, the chewing gum had already been swallowed. You greedy guts. Lin had no choice but to let it go. Given Fang's size, a small, thumb-sized piece of chewing gum wouldn't harm him, but if it had been chocolate, that would have been disastrous. Looks like I'll have to throw away the other half. Surely no one would want to taste the flavor of Fang's dog food. But when he reached into his pocket, the other half of the gum that should have been there was gone, which surprised Lin. Where did I accidentally drop it? He pondered for a moment but quickly gave up. A half-eaten piece of open chewing gum, even if someone found it, surely no one would think of putting it in their mouth. Oh, right, Hagrid, do you know where I can find grass bells and bouncing bulbs in the woods? I need them for potion making, and buying them is too expensive. They should be in the Forbidden Forest, shouldn't they? Those things. Hagrid pondered. They're everywhere in the woods. See those moving bushes? The grass bells are inside them. As for the bouncing bulbs, you'll have to look under the trees, near the ones with stones on the ground. There are lots right on the edge of the forest. Professor Sprout occasionally brings students out to pick some too. But remember, you're not allowed inside the forest, only right on the edge. If you need any other potion ingredients, I can help you look for them, or I can ask the centaurs. They're usually happy to trade for a bit of meat, and I've got plenty of that. Hagrid was a very warm-hearted person, and few people were willing to be his friend. He was very generous toward a young wizard like Lin, whose temperament suited him well. That won't be necessary. I can buy most ingredients, and they aren't expensive. Lin didn't want to trouble Hagrid unless it was something that couldn't be easily solved by spending money. Just because Hagrid was kind to him, Lin couldn't take advantage of his good nature. Well then, I'm going to gather herbs. I plan on brewing some potions when I get back. Go on, go on. Hagrid waved his hand cheerfully. He naturally liked studious and good children like Lin. I've already started making the cloaks for you all. It'll take another 2 weeks to tan the cowhide properly, but I should have them ready before the snow falls. Remember to come over together then to try them on. We'll definitely be there. Lin waved goodbye to Hagrid and walked briskly toward the edge of the forest. With his telekinesis, Lin could easily catch the grass bells from the bushes even without a net. Although the bouncing bulbs hopped around, they couldn't escape his grasp either. On the edge of the forest, Lin also found many magical plants that he might need in the future. The Forbidden Forest was incredibly rich in resources, calling it a treasure trove was no exaggeration. The joy of getting things for free made Lin thoroughly enjoy himself. In such a magical world, even with the soul of an adult, he couldn't help but feel a childlike happiness and delight. It was like how a 30-year-old man still loves building blocks, only the small houses have turned into complex Lego models. Even if he's dead tired from work, he'll happily sit for 2 hours after getting home, until his back aches. After an unknown amount of time, Lin finally patted his robes, still reluctant to leave, as the sky began to grow dim. Inside his 4-dimensional pocket, the harvested ingredients were piled almost into a small mountain. With just a little processing, these lovely herbs would turn into shiny silver sickles and land in his pocket. Humming a little tune, Lin, who had saved a fortune, returned to the entrance of Hogwarts Castle in the blink of an eye. The chatter of the young wizards could already be heard ahead, dinner was being served in the Great Hall, and smoke was rising from Hagrid's hut behind him. As soon as he reached the Gryffindor table, he heard a triumphant, boastful voice. 13 wins in a row. I just beat 13 people straight. Ron, his face flushed with excitement, wore a small, proud expression. I told you I was good, Seamus. Wizard's chess is a bit difficult, but to play well, you need talent. It's not some advanced skill you can just pick up. Seamus, whose shoulder Ron was currently draped over, had a slight look of resistance on his face. Honestly, he regretted buying Wizard's chess in Diagon Alley and bringing it to school. After Ron won, the guy had been rambling for at least half an hour, claiming to teach him how to play, but after all that talk, there was no substance, it was all just bragging. Lin wasn't interested in chess, but as he walked past Ron inexplicably raised an eyebrow and glanced at him. Although Lin didn't know what the guy meant, he politely nodded in acknowledgement. Lin, sit here. Hallie's voice rang out. She waved at Lin from across the table. Chu was also sitting at the Gryffindor table, whispering secrets with her best friend, Marietta. It seemed they had spent the afternoon together, as they were all wearing bracelets made of colorful small round stones. Where were you this afternoon? As Lynn walked around the long table and sat next to Hallie, she happily told him, we went and did horoscope divination this afternoon. Chu is so good at it. We even made constellation bracelets. Look, aren't they pretty? Hallie extended her arm in front of Lynn, showing off her bracelet. It had patterns made of dots and lines that, when put together, formed her constellation. Chu made one for you too, you know. Isn't she nice to you? Hallie chuckled and nudged Lynn with her elbow. She made it especially for you, Tilda. Hallie. Chu, sitting nearby, couldn't listen anymore. Her face flushed slightly. She leaned across Lynn, grabbed Hallie's cheek, and squished and molded it in her hand. I'm sorry, Tilda. Hallie blinked and spoke in a pitiful voice, but as soon as Chu let go, she asked with a grin, aren't you going to give your treasure to Lynn now? Oh, Tilda, I get it. You want to give it to him secretly as a surprise after dinner, right? I'm sorry, Chu, but I'll do it again next time. Amused by Hallie's remark, Chu suddenly couldn't feel angry anymore. Hallie's demeanor was a bit cheeky, but it was impossible to dislike her. But she still feigned annoyance and followed up on Hallie's comment by asking, why? A girl shouldn't have to make the first move. Lynn is too much of an oblivious idiot. Since when did you start worrying about me? Lynn shook his head, both annoyed and amused, and flicked Hallie on the forehead. Can't we just accept the premise that since I'm a handsome guy, it's perfectly reasonable for girls to throw themselves at me? Wow, how can someone be so shameless? Now the shameless handsome guy is hungry. This afternoon, I picked up a lot of herbs by the forest, as if they were free. I just couldn't stop. Lynn, who had changed the subject, took a steak, happily cut a large piece, and put it into his mouth. Are you researching new dishes? The little food lover, Harry, blinked her eyes and tugged on Lynn's sleeve. Will there be something good to eat tomorrow? Maybe I can invent some specialty snacks like stir-fried bouncy mushroom balls or deep-fried grass bell worms. Will that be delicious? Harry's eyes widened, looking a bit adorable at the moment, as she bit her lip, hesitating. I don't know if it'll be delicious, but it'll definitely give you diarrhea. Lynn was amused by Harry's gluttony. Both of these things are slightly poisonous and need to be processed before being used as medicine. Seeing Lynn surrounded by pretty girls, the boys who witnessed this couldn't help but feel a little sour. It was one thing to be on good terms with Harry, the flower of Gryffindor, as rumors of them being childhood sweethearts had long been flying around, but to also snag a beautiful girl from Ravenclaw was just too much. How could one person monopolize all the good things in the world, right? Lynn was subtly becoming a public enemy among the boys, but they could only look on with envy. After all, his good looks were natural. What's so great about that? Ron, who had previously wanted to show off in front of Lynn but was ignored, pouted and grumbled, but his words were overheard by Seamus beside him. He's just handsome, good at studies, liked by professors, has a childhood sweetheart, and is also liked by a pretty girl from Ravenclaw. What's so great about that? Seamus nodded seriously, unsure if he was agreeing with Ron or subtly stabbing him in the heart. But no matter what, Ron's face darkened even more upon hearing Seamus's words. He grabbed 2 chicken legs, ready to devour them, but as soon as the chicken leg entered his mouth, he felt that the taste was a bit off. Are today's chicken legs stew flavored? Ron suspiciously looked at the chicken leg with a bite mark. His mouth was now filled with the rich meaty aroma of potato stew. It was actually not bad. The stew tasted much better than the chicken leg. What nonsense are you talking about, Ron? A chicken leg is a chicken leg. Fried chicken legs need ketchup. Seamus said vaguely, cutting and stuffing steak into his mouth. You heretic. Ron immediately became displeased, taking 2 forceful bites of the chicken. Fried chicken legs don't need any sauce. You just eat. Why does it still taste like stew? Fried chicken stew. Ron, who was starting to doubt his sanity, bit into it again, not believing his senses, but the taste was still off. Just as he chewed a few times, utterly perplexed and ready to swallow, Ron suddenly clutched his own neck with his greasy hand. A raw, bloody meat taste rushed straight to his head, quite potent. Ron, what's wrong with you? Seamus looked at Ron strangely, not quite understanding what kind of performance art this was. Why is it raw? After struggling to swallow the meat stuck in his throat, Ron looked at the chicken leg, now missing 2 bites, with a horrified expression. How is that possible? The chicken leg is clearly cooked. How could it be wrong? Seamus glanced at the chicken leg Ron had thrown on the table, seeing no signs of undercooked blood. But it clearly, retched Tilda. Ron suddenly retched, choked again by the bloody taste of raw meat in his mouth, his face turning deathly pale, looking more like he had been poisoned. Upon seeing this, Seamus quickly stood up, seemingly afraid of catching whatever Ron had, but he couldn't just run away, that would be too disloyal. Prefect. Percy Prefect. Seamus's mind was quite sharp. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that Percy was Ron's brother, so he quickly spoke. As soon as someone called, Prefect, Percy instantly appeared. What's going on? It's Ron. He seems to be poisoned, or maybe under some evil curse. Seamus hesitated, saying, Ron was talking about stew-flavored chicken legs, and weird things like the chicken leg not being cooked, and his face also turned very pale. Is that so? Percy looked at Ron with some suspicion. After the raw, bloody taste in his mouth subsided, Ron's complexion improved significantly. He was currently clutching the bitten chicken leg, staring at it with wide eyes. Isn't he perfectly fine? Percy leaned down and looked at Ron, finding nothing amiss. Are you all right, Ron? Did you choke just now? No, Ron himself couldn't describe the feeling he had just experienced, it was as if he had been dreaming. So, you're fine, right? Percy's expression became a little more serious. Don't clown around, and don't play pranks like Fred and George. It's dinner time, so behave yourself. Ron, having been scolded by Percy, opened his mouth, then sullenly lowered his head, muttering words that only he could hear. All right, Ron was just playing a prank. It's nothing. Percy patted Seamus's shoulder. Although it was a false alarm, he still enjoyed being called Prefect, and feeling needed. It was a prank. Ron, what kind of circus act are you performing? Seamus sat down, half believing, half doubting. Seeing that Ron seemed fine now, he shifted his backside, moving further away from Ron. After all, being pranked was always annoying. Ron must have been making a fool of him just now. This scene was witnessed by many students, but the young wizards, who ultimately didn't see much entertainment, quickly shifted their gaze. This opened, half-eaten stick of gum, someone actually put it in their mouth. Lynn, who had seen Ron's earlier antics, silently complained in his heart, how greedy is his mouth. I'm really speechless. But upon seeing Ron once again dual-wielding chicken legs, Lynn seemed to understand. Based on Ron's current demonstrated obsession with eating, he really should have been in Hufflepuff, but his recklessness in daring to put unknown things into his mouth meant that being sorted into Gryffindor wasn't wrong either. Sigh, forget it, it's none of my business, I didn't make him eat it anyway. But Fang. Thinking of this, Lynn was still a little uneasy. Fang wouldn't eat random things, would he? Never mind, I won't worry about it. It just transmits taste, it's not actually eaten, and it wears off in a day, so it's not long. After silently mourning for Ron for a second, Lynn quickly put the matter aside, treating it as a lesson for him to remember. Anyway, even if Lynn wanted to help, he couldn't prematurely neutralize the chewing gum's effect. Ron should be thankful Fang doesn't have a habit of eating supper at night. Big-hearted and thick-skinned, Ron slept soundly last night, immediately forgetting the strange incident at dinner. His snores were loud, interspersed with smacking and grumbling. Early Sunday morning, Lynn left the dormitory. The harvested herbs needed processing, but fortunately, he had learned to multitask while using his psychic powers. His invisible psychic energy became an octopus, quickly finishing the work with its many hands. By the time he reached the Great Hall, it was just when the young witches and wizards were coming down for breakfast. Sigurd. Lynn had only been seated for a few minutes when it was time for the morning owl post. Sigurd flew in, struggling slightly with a huge package. You've worked hard, Sigurd. Lynn rubbed Sigurd's small head and pulled out a few owl treats, placing them by its beak. But the little fellow was quite picky. After a bite of dry food, it set its sights on Lynn's fried egg. It pawed at it, buried its head, and started gnawing, occasionally rinsing its mouth with Lynn's milk. You rascal. Given that Sigurd had delivered his ordered potion ingredients today, Lynn could only dotingly help it tidy its feathers and let it eat. Sigurd seems to have gotten fatter, huh? Harley, reaching out to pet Sigurd, let out a somewhat mischievous laugh. He, it's so warm inside, let me touch your belly, Sigurd tilde. Ku ka ka tilde. Sigurd, a bit ruffled from the petting, shook its body dismissively. After grabbing the unfinished fried egg, it also snatched a hard-boiled egg Lynn had peeled, then flapped its wings and flew away. Stingy, Hedwig is much better. Harley pouted. Sigurd, being an adult capable of adding goshawks to its diet, was naturally much prouder. Even Hedwig would get ruffled if you messed with her like that, alright. Lynn grabbed a new cup of milk, chugged it down, and gave her a flick on the forehead. Lynn, you're bullying Harley again. Cho Chong, having finished breakfast, walked over to Lynn and slapped his hand away. An occasional tap helps brain development. No way. Harley shook her head. You're just vengeful, that's why you're a bad influence on Sigurd. I get my revenge on the spot, how could I hold a grudge? Just as Lynn stood up to bid them farewell, a commotion spread from the Gryffindor table. Tilde. A loud retching sound rang out, accompanied by a figure leaning on the table, throwing up profusely. Ron, who had forgotten everything that happened yesterday, was happily eating breakfast, thinking about which lucky person he'd challenge to a game of chess later to show off his chess sage prowess, when that strange feeling from yesterday reappeared. At first, Ron wasn't too concerned. After all, having the rich taste of stewed meat in his mouth while eating breakfast wasn't bad. But as he ate his second sandwich, second meat pie, a cup of pumpkin juice, and a homemade ham and cheese burger, an indescribable taste appeared in his mouth. It's poop. It's poop. After throwing up, Ron shrieked. His pupils were dilated, his eyes vacant. Though dazed, his voice was still loud. There's poop in the breakfast. His declaration startled the young witches and wizards who heard it, causing them to drop their cutlery and turn their gaze towards him. However, more eye-catching than Ron was the fat rat rolling on the Gryffindor table, screaming and starting to spray. This was truly the first time they had seen such an abstract performance from both master and pet. It's bitter and stinky, with a hint of musk, sticky and coats the mouth. Tilde. How is it watery too? Ron, his face green from vomiting, knelt on the ground. This experience, so real it felt as if he had just eaten it himself, instantly turned his brain into a muddle. The words that instinctively burst out of his mouth didn't even pass through his mind. Upon hearing this review, the young witches and wizards instantly felt unwell. If you're going to eat it yourself, why describe the taste and texture? It even has hay. It's horse manure. Ron suddenly looked up and, for some reason, smacked his lips again. It's even a little sweet. This outrageous statement immediately caused the young witches and wizards in the Great Hall to explode. They fled from Ron, who was surrounded by filth, as if he were a plague god, pinching their noses and running away. Even his own brothers, Percy, Fred, and George, kept their distance, their faces as red as monkeys' bottoms, purely out of embarrassment. Can't stay in the Great Hall, I'm making a respectful retreat. Lynn, feeling a bit flustered, slipped away, not to the room of requirement to brew potions, but dashed out the Great Hall doors, left the castle, and instantly apparated directly to the front door of Hagrid's hut. Fang! Don't eat poop again, holy crap. So much poop. A mountain of poop. Fang, hearing Lynn's call, raised its head. Rubeus Hagrid, holding a large dung fork, also turned his head. What are you doing, Hagrid? Lynn pointed at the dung fork in Hagrid's hand and asked cautiously. Oh, this. Rubeus Hagrid waved his hand dismissively. We need to prepare pumpkins for Halloween. Although there's magic to make pumpkins grow big, the fertilizer must be good. I need to start processing the fertilizer now. Fresh manure can't be used directly, it needs to be mixed and fermented for a while, and adding a bit of unicorn dung makes it even better. I've been doing it this way for decades, and every year the Halloween pumpkins are especially big and good. Didn't I feed you this morning? Fang, why are you sneaking food again? Go on, go on. If you get diarrhea tonight, don't ask me to open the door for you or accompany you to the toilet. Lynn was silent, unsure what to say, but Rubeus Hagrid seemed to sense something. I'll make Fang brush his teeth properly, but dogs, you know, they always have this habit. Fang gets greedy, it's his nature. Even if you feed him well, he'll still do this. Al, Alright. Lin opened his mouth. He couldn't tell Rubius Hagrid that because of Fang, there was now someone in the Great Hall, eating, with Fang from a distance, could he? Even if he said it, no one would believe him. Magic isn't omnipotent. There shouldn't be any wizard in the world who would invent a spell to make someone taste this stuff, right? Surely not. Although I can understand how you feel, Lin. Rubius Hagrid leaned on his dung fork and spread his hands helplessly. After you take herbology class, you'll actually deal with these things often. After all, growing magical plants is like growing vegetables, they all need fertilizer. And Professor Sprout's requirements are even more precise. My methods were all taught to me by her. I understand that. Lin waved his hand. I've grown vegetables, I'm not averse to manure. It's just, if Harley knew Fang ate this. I'll clean Fang right now. You absolutely mustn't tell Harley about this. Without another word, Rubius Hagrid immediately picked up Fang, took a few steps to the nearby well, and pulled up a large bucket of icy well water. Woof 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 woof. Fang, shivering from the cold well water, cried out indignantly. Rubius Hagrid was almost scrubbing off all its dog hair. Its glossy black fur. But as Rubius Hagrid shoved an oversized shoe brush into Fang's mouth to brush its teeth, Fang's barks completely turned into muffled grumbles. Sigh. I hope Ron is okay. Lin could only sigh at the sight, but after turning to leave, he still couldn't hold back his laughter, his shoulders shaking as he instantly apparated back to the 8th floor of the castle. But, maybe I really can invent. Never mind, poor Ron, I'll compensate him later. Stop thinking, make money, make money. Making money is the most important thing. Flames licked the bottom of the cauldron, and bubbling sounds rose and fell. The precise and elegant concoction would earn praise even from Severus Snape. The quality of the potions personally brewed by Lin was definitely not bad. Although he had only recently started practicing magic, his precise control over magical power was something most wizards could hardly match. Magic is a discipline that highly values talent. Whether it's magical talent or something else, it determines the upper limit a wizard can reach. Or even the lower limit. For talented people, just casually tinkering around can already be the maximum many others can achieve. Snape, when he was studying at Hogwarts, had exactly this kind of talent in potions. Lin was very skilled in this area. Although his talent might not surpass Snape's, he possessed an unparalleled knack for mass-producing potions. Telekinesis acted as his 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th hands. Tending to over a dozen cauldrons simultaneously was no problem at all, and his X-ray vision allowed him to survey the entire process without moving. He didn't even need to use his hands to add ingredients, he could instantly teleport them directly into the cauldrons. Across more than 10 cauldrons, the timing for adding the herbs was precise to the fraction of a second. Telekinesis was his best assistant for transforming into an assembly line and manufacturing potions in large quantities. As an extension of his will, it could even take over the task of stirring the potions. Energy potion and invigoration draft, these two commonly used potions were guaranteed sellers. Although the price wasn't high, the material costs were very low, and more importantly, the brewing time was short. On average, they were ready in an hour and 20 minutes. Lin worked hard all morning and afternoon, producing 7 batches of finished products, totaling 84 cauldrons. After bottling, he had 422 vials, earning about 3 sickles per vial, which resulted in a massive profit of 74 galleons and 8 sickles. In just 1 week, he could earn enough money for a Nimbus 2000. While this item might not compare to a Muggle supercar in the wizarding world, it was definitely considered a luxury item. Compared to a normal job, brewing potions felt like outright robbery to Lin, but no other wizard could possibly achieve such high efficiency. Potion brewing is mentally taxing. You have to constantly observe the cauldrons, stir them at the right time, and manage the integration of the ingredients. A potions master who can successfully manage 3 cauldrons simultaneously is already considered outstanding. The combination of telekinesis, X-ray vision, and apparition brought Lin an extraordinary amount of assistance. The still warm potions were poured into glass vials. After collecting the rewards of his day's work, Lin headed down to the Great Hall for dinner. The young wizards seemed to have forgotten about the morning's incident, but perhaps because Ron had shouted, "There's poop in the food." The dinner menu consisted entirely of solid dishes. There wasn't a single mushy item in sight, even the thick pumpkin juice had been replaced with lemonade and other fruit drinks. Hey, Fred, George, how's your brother doing? Lynn found the twin brothers at the dinner table, patted their shoulders, and asked. He's resting in the hospital wing, but Madame Pomfrey didn't find any trace of a curse on him, nor was he poisoned. Fred shrugged. Ron is perfectly healthy, so Madame Pomfrey can only suspect that the guy is allergic to some kind of food, which caused his vomiting and babbling this morning. That's actually hard to believe, George grumbled, grinning. Ron is less picky than a garden gnome. When he was little, he even stole Errol's owl treats to eat as snacks, and he never got sick. Maybe a spider crawled into his mouth while he was asleep and he swallowed it whole. Hearing George's words, Fred suddenly burst out laughing. Ron is terrified of spiders. I bet that's what happened. Right, Lynn, what did you need us for? The goods are ready. Lynn said in a low voice. How much? The twins glanced at Lynn in surprise, the guy certainly worked fast. Over 400 vials, split 4-6 between energy potions and invigoration drafts. Whoa tilde. The twins, who had done this business before, drew a sharp breath. We couldn't necessarily brew this much in a whole month. Potion brewing isn't easy work. Well, blame my exceptional talent, and the fact that I really need the money. Alright, follow us after dinner. The round trip takes about 2.5 hours, so we can't leave too late. Lynn quickly finished his dinner, put down his knife and fork, and stood up. Cho, I have something to do tonight, so I won't be able to listen to your stories. Before leaving, Lynn made sure to stop by the Ravenclaw table and tell Cho. Oh, alright, if you have things you need to take care of. Cho nodded in response. But promise me you're not sneaking off to the Forbidden Forest. It's very dangerous there. I promise I'm not. I'm just researching some small gadgets with Fred and George. Lynn left with the twins and followed them upstairs. Hogwarts has many secret passages connecting it to the outside, like the one behind the one-eyed witch statue on the 4th floor, or the path near the Whomping Willow outside the castle, but the one we use most often is here. After arriving on the 7th floor of the castle, the twins led Lynn to a portrait of a witch. The passage behind the one-eyed witch on the 4th floor leads to the cellar of Honeydukes. Honestly, going in and out there is inconvenient. You could easily be mistaken for a thief. But this one is different. The passage behind the Grey Lady's portrait connects to a public flow network cottage in Hogsmeade. That cottage was converted from an abandoned, empty house, but the secret passage inside hasn't been damaged or discovered, so it's very safe to use. When we exit there, no one will suspect anything, they'll just think we're wizards who just arrived in Hogsmeade using the flow network. Before we go, though, we need to disguise ourselves. Change out of your school robes and put this on. George handed him a slightly worn black hooded cloak. Cover your face when we leave. Don't worry, this attire is very common at the Hog's Head Inn. In fact, almost everyone dresses like this. They generally don't want their identities recognized. George and I know a few blokes. We talked business with them during the first few days of term and got a lot of cheap ingredients. Although these guys are scumbags, they won't dare cause trouble in the pub. Mundungus. We heard Dad mention his name. Even though he's a thief, he's not very brave, and he has a lot of connections. At the Hog's Head, he's considered a relatively reliable black market dealer. Finally, suck on one of these. George handed him a dried leaf. It's a mandrake leaf. Drying it almost destroys the magical properties, but holding it in your mouth causes a slight numbing effect, which changes your voice, making it sound much hoarser. You guys are really well prepared. After accepting the items, Lynn couldn't help but look at the twins with newfound respect. Of course. We never take unnecessary risks. Gryffindors know how to use their brains, too. The real idiots are those Slytherin maggots. Although we caused Hagrid a fair amount of trouble before, we never risked our lives in the Forbidden Forest. We just gathered materials near the edges. We were really poor back then, and trying to make money was incredibly difficult without startup capital. After packing their things, the three walked along the spacious secret passage. A rickety, old elevator creaked as it carried them deep underground, depositing them onto a flagstone path that was already starting to crack. The winding and twisting path was far from straight. Although they walked at a steady pace, it took them nearly an hour to reach Hogsmeade Village, which was not far from Hogwarts. If they had taken the main road above ground, the journey from Hogwarts to Hogsmeade would have only taken about half an hour. The public flow network shed was completely empty. They crawled out of the shed's cellar, climbed the dilapidated wooden stairs, and emerged behind a wall of rotten wooden barrels. The twins, familiar with the routine, used a floating charm to move aside a narrow passage, and the three of them carefully squeezed through. Let's go. Fred pulled up his hood and spoke in a low voice. Both of the twins were nearly as tall as most adult wizards, and their height of 1.75 meters was certainly not short. Lynn, however, was a bit lacking. Boys generally develop a little slower, and Lynn, who would only turn 12 in a few months, was currently only 1.6 meters tall. However, combined with his current raspy, old man-like voice, it wasn't so easy to expose him. Lynn also wore a pair of gloves to conceal his fingers. The crooked sign of the Hog's Head Inn cast a long shadow in the dim light. A severed wild boar's head hung askew. The proprietor of this establishment truly had terrible taste. As they pushed the door open, a stale, dusty odor immediately hit their noses, accompanied by the smell of cheap alcohol and a complex stench of various repulsive bodily odors. Fred pulled a few silver sickles from his pocket, knocked on the bar counter, and ordered 3 bottles of the cheapest butterbeer. This was the tip for the bar owner. Whether they drank it or not, they had to pay whenever they came to conduct business. The filthy bottles immediately discouraged Lynn from wanting a taste, and the twins, just like him, didn't touch their drinks at all. What caught Lynn's attention was that the bar owner had a pair of familiar, deep blue eyes. If he wasn't mistaken, the proprietor of the Hog's Head Inn was Aberforth Dumbledore, the younger brother of Albus Dumbledore. However, the relationship between the two brothers was terrible, and especially after their sister Ariana died in an accident, the two had completely stopped seeing each other. Aberforth did not possess the astonishing talent of his elder brother. He was short-tempered, impulsive, and easily provoked. The very image of people's stereotype of a Gryffindor. Hey, Dung. Fred's raspy voice spoke softly, I've got a batch of good stuff here. Shish. Mundungus, who was sitting in the corner of the bar drinking a glass of greenish liquor, quickly raised a finger. He beckoned them closer and lowered his voice, don't you bloody call my name. Someone's watching me. I don't want to get caught and sold off to a brothel run by goblins. Looks like you owe a lot this time. You're lucky they didn't break your legs. George chuckled. They knew exactly what sort of character this man was. I don't owe any money. Those idiots chose the cauldrons themselves. If they explode and scald someone to death, you can't blame me. Why don't they keep their eyes open, huh? Tui. Mundungus grumbled. He had always been in the business of reselling cauldrons of dubious origin. These items were considered consumables for potion makers. There was no concept of a cauldron being passed down through generations. Under normal circumstances, a cauldron would only last about 2 years if not used intensely. Once potion ingredients permeated the pot, it was time to replace it, otherwise, it would contaminate subsequent potions, even if the pot was only used for brewing one type of potion. The alternatives were either scraping the inner wall thin or letting the cauldron sit unused for several years. Black market merchants like him almost always chose the first method. The chance of the cauldron exploding was purely a matter of luck. If someone picked one with a particularly thin bottom, it might blow up after just a few uses. So, what good stuff do you have? Mundungus rubbed his hands together, his shifty eyes scrutinizing the three of them. A batch of high-quality potions, energy potions and invigoration drafts. You know these things sell themselves. 422 bottles, 6 sickles each. Fair price, right? Pa. Mundungus's eyes instantly lit up, but his first move was to try and beat down the price. Are you mad or am I? 6 sickles a bottle. I might not even make a single sickle selling them on, and I have to take the risk with this stuff. 4 sickles a bottle, and I'll take the whole lot. What rubbish are you spouting? 4 sickles. That's barely more than the cost price. Do you think we're running some petty, thieving operation like yours? Final offer. 6 sickles, not a penny less. We'll have new stock every week. Take it or leave it, you fool, plenty of people will buy it. There's no bloody risk in reselling this. If it weren't for the fact that you sourced some decent stuff for us before, do you think you'd even be qualified to make this money? The twins, who possessed a high talent for haggling, quickly shut Mundungus down. The old rogue, who had spent many years scrambling in the black market, couldn't help but feel a little unnerved. However, they were right. These two widely used potions were cheap, but the demand was genuinely massive. Whether someone was working like a dog, pulling an all-nighter, or simply feeling under the weather, they could down a bottle and the effect was immediate. Enough, enough. I'm sick of you too. 6 sickles it is, 6 sickles. Just because we've had good business before, I'll take the hit, but I need to inspect the goods. If the potion quality isn't up to scratch, forget about getting that price. Fine, but the amount you drink for testing is included in the total. You're counting that little bit of money too. Tooey. I've never met such stingy blokes in my life. Mundungus grumbled, unable to gain even the slightest advantage. Still, this deal was profitable, it would bring in at least a dozen galleons, and he'd be an idiot to turn it down. He got up and walked to the back of the pub, where there were partitioned small rooms specifically for conducting transactions and deliveries. As soon as the dilapidated wooden door shut, Mundungus impatiently asked, "Where's the stock?" Lin reached out his hand from beneath his robes, pulling out one crude wooden crate after another, each one packed full of potions. They're fresh. Mundungus casually picked up a bottle. The potion inside hadn't even completely cooled yet. We just found a new partner, someone with serious capabilities. Looks like your operation is quite large. Seeing such a large batch of fresh goods, Mundungus settled down a bit. Although they were common potions, skilled potion makers were genuinely hard to find. Brewing was exhausting. Even simple, basic potions required careful monitoring. You couldn't just light the fire and walk away. Paradoxically, the shorter the brewing time, the more concentration required. Taking one bottle of each potion, Mundungus took a small sip, then raised an eyebrow slightly. Top-notch stuff. Very good, very good. He nodded, beaming. He had initially expected to make less than a sickle per bottle, but now he was confident he could make at least 1 sickle, and they would certainly sell quickly. The money is here. Mundungus pulled out a grubby money bag and started scooping out coins by the handful. There weren't many galleons, but plenty of silver sickles and bronze nuts. For a payment worth over 100 galleons, he managed to produce a huge pile of heavy silver and copper coins. Next time, use galleons. Lin said in a deep voice, I also need to order some ingredients. I'll be back at this time next week. Say no more. Whatever you need is fine. When Dung handles things, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. After counting the payment and informing Mundungus of the ingredients they needed next time, the three of them left the Hog's Head Inn and disappeared into the Hogsmeade night. How about I treat you two to a drink? Lin suggested this as they reached the entrance of the Three Broomsticks. No one refuses butterbeer, but I'd be afraid of getting the runs if I drank the stuff from the Hog's Head. Fred and George certainly weren't going to decline. Having a hot cup of butterbeer while walking through the cold, damp tunnel sounded absolutely perfect. Lin's reason for making money was simple. After finishing the introductory wandlore book Ollivander gave him, he planned to start some simple experiments. Although Hagrid could provide him with some unwanted unicorn hair and he could poach some magical trees from the Forbidden Forest. These trees grew in vast expanses in the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid even chopped them for firewood. While wand cores and wood could be acquired for free, Lin needed to buy some tools and auxiliary materials himself. This was no small sum, he would need several hundred galleons to get his hands on them. Moreover, Chu's birthday was approaching, with only 2 weeks left, and he needed to prepare a gift. Chu had always been very good to him. Aside from being a bit too eager to pursue him, she was impeccable. The birthday gift naturally couldn't be shabby. But he didn't need to send a broomstick, because Harry had already ordered one. The little rich girl Harry had plenty of money. If new students weren't forbidden from bringing brooms to school, she would have long bought 2 Firebolt 2000s, one for herself and one for Lin. Such a small amount of money was just a drop in the bucket for her. However, Lin only spent a little time brewing potions now, once at noon and once after dinner. With 12 cauldrons per batch, he could produce about 120 bottles of potions a day, earning roughly 21 to 22 galleons. This amounted to over 600 galleons a month, a salary comparable to a school professor. Even in the Muggle world, a monthly salary of £3,000 was quite good. After Transfiguration class on Tuesday, Professor McGonagall invited Lynn to join her club. However, she told Lynn not to worry about the Transfiguration League for now, preferring him to focus on basic transfiguration practice at first, which was exactly what Lynn wanted to do. While transforming objects into various animals was interesting, for his future studies in wandlore, he had already planned to spend more time practicing the most basic, material shaping, in transfiguration, which is the skill of material processing. Although this was the most fundamental introduction to transfiguration, its upper limit was also very high. Even if you knew nothing of advanced transfiguration, mastering just this one technique would not prevent you from becoming a transfiguration master recognized by wizards worldwide. This transfiguration technique, which did not involve changes in material form, was magic that could directly interfere with the structural composition of matter, and it was also how modern wizards explored the legend of turning lead into gold. Ever since a Muggle-born wizard successfully reshaped a block of carbon into a diamond through structural transfiguration, the concept of turning lead into gold, which had been relegated to the scrap heap, once again became a trending topic in the wizarding world. Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone, was almost an irreplicable magical miracle for others, but transfiguration, through the method of reconstructing material structures, could be learned and copied. If there was one magical discipline that contained science, it was undoubtedly transfiguration. After Professor McGonagall told Lynn this news, he could hardly believe his ears. Is magic that advanced now, Professor? Why not? Professor McGonagall looked at Lynn calmly. Magic has always been evolving. With more and more Muggle-born wizards, they have infused the magical world with fresh knowledge. While there are many traditional wizards, it's undeniable that the proportion of pure-blood wizards advocating for tradition is shrinking. Nearly half of Hogwarts students come from Muggle families, and among the remaining large half, the proportion of half-blood wizards far exceeds that of pure-blood wizards. I am also of mixed heritage, Professor McGonagall smiled slightly at Lynn. My mother was a witch who graduated from Ravenclaw, and my father was a church pastor. If magic doesn't keep pace with the times, then it's very possible that one day in the future, magic will completely decline. If you observe the magical world carefully, you'll find that many Muggle creations have already integrated into the magical world. However, the interference of magical fields with Muggle creations has hindered their combination, but perhaps one day in the future, we will be able to solve this problem. You should participate more in these competitions that involve communication with other magic schools. The world is more exciting than you imagine, Lynn. England is just an insignificant small piece of land that makes up the magical world, and Hogwarts is not the entirety of the magical world. Go out, see the world. I believe this is something every wizard who wants to go far on the magical path must do. Sure enough, reality and novels are different. After bidding farewell to Professor McGonagall, Lynn pondered silently in the corridor. But this was also normal. How many pure-blood wizards were there? In the relatively sparsely populated, ancient times, such family inheritance structures could better preserve strength and maintain their privileges. However, in the present world, which has entered a largely peaceful era, the old rules and customs are difficult to maintain. A tree dies if it stays put, but a person thrives by moving. Not all wizards are content with stagnation, many are willing to embrace progress. The new paths and worlds they forge will naturally attract followers. The rolling tide of historical development is unstoppable, to resist it is to perish. It seems I need to hurry. Perhaps this era I'm in is the best golden age for magical development. A new order has just been born, and the old rules have not yet shattered. When this destined tide arrives, it will be time to ride the waves. Suddenly full of energy, Lynn wished he could devour the remaining 20 or so thick books right away, but no matter how eager he was, finishing these books would take until around Christmas. Time quickly advanced to Friday. The young wizards, gradually accustomed to life at Hogwarts, began to settle into their studies. In their second week of herbology, they finally got to use small shovels in the greenhouses. However, the process of digging in a large garden with small shovels was not as pleasant as they had imagined. If you don't want your fingers to become as thick as carrots, don't reach out and touch them. Professor Sprout's gaze swept back and forth across the greenhouse, reminding them in a stern voice, although its fruit looks beautiful, dragon's claw peppers cannot be eaten directly, Mr. Weasley. You don't want to get an upset stomach again, do you? Breathing fire from your mouth is much worse than vomiting. A burst of laughter erupted in the classroom as the young wizards from Gryffindor and Hufflepuff turned to look at Ron, who had been singled out by the professor. Beside him, Neville cautiously tugged at his sleeve. I told you not to touch this, Neville whispered. Then why didn't you say so earlier? After being called out by the professor, Ron turned his head, his face sour. But at least it wasn't Snape, otherwise Gryffindor would have become Griffin screwed by now. Don't mind him, Neville, this guy never listens anyway. Dean, standing nearby, patted Neville's hand. Although they shared a dormitory, it was clear that Seamus, Dean, and Neville, who found common ground early in the school year, had a better relationship. Now, who can tell me what we need to pay attention to when planting puffapod seedlings? Professor Sprout asked with a smile as she saw the students in position. Water it thoroughly, soak the soil. Neville cautiously raised his hand. He had diligently reviewed his lessons before class. Exactly, puffapods like a moist environment and require a lot of water. Gryffindor, 1 point. Anyone else want to add anything? Don't compact the soil, and you can also bury a little camellia seed meal at the bottom of the hole when digging, it's one of the best fertilizers for puffapods. Excellent, Hannah, Hufflepuff, 1 point. Anyone else want to add something? The lively greenhouse filled with the chatter of young wizards, the engaging herbology practical class made them temporarily forget their afternoon lessons. But the guillotine hanging over their heads would eventually fall. After lunch, the gloomy underground classroom drained the color from the young wizards' faces. Last week's first potions class left a lasting impression, with Snape's imposing presence deeply etched into the young wizards' minds. However, Harry wasn't resistant to potions class at all. In fact, she found Snape quite approachable, no different from other professors, just a bit fierce. He would scold them for mistakes, even more strictly than Professor McGonagall. Especially today. Snape, who was already waiting in the classroom, had a tightly drawn face, as if a dark cloud was hovering over his head, with lightning and thunder roaring. The young wizards in the classroom shivered, feeling like every minute spent waiting for the class bell to ring was an eternity. Meanwhile, Draco, who was still in the corridor and hadn't reached the classroom, was chatting cheerfully with his cronies, Crabbe and Goyle. After more than a week, he had concocted what he considered a perfect plan. To be honest, Draco didn't want any physical confrontation with this guy who could supposedly bend steel pipes. He wasn't sure if what he saw that day was a magic trick or real, and even if Lynn didn't have that much strength, he didn't want to find out how heavy this guy's fists were. As a traditional Slytherin, he had learned enough techniques from his father since childhood. Framing, backstabbing, snitching, mudslinging, it was a family tradition. Although he was just starting out, he was quite confident. He planned to give Lynn a hard time in this potions class. Snape was, after all, the head of Slytherin, and his father had a good relationship with him. Before he came to Hogwarts, his father had already spoken to Snape, and the extra points he received in the first potions class confirmed this. Lynn, that guy, didn't get a single point. That stinking Gryffindor dog. Just you wait today. Excitedly waving his fist, a sly smile crept onto Draco's face. He swaggered into the classroom, and suddenly, he felt a cold gaze fall upon him. It wasn't from the young wizards in front, but from the side of the podium. Draco's body instantly froze, and the class bell rang at that moment. The atmosphere in the classroom immediately dropped to freezing point. He hunched his shoulders, wanting to quickly walk to his seat. In my class, I do not tolerate tardiness. Snape's chilling voice rang out, sending cold sweat down everyone's backs. Draco Malfoy. Draco, whose name was called directly, tensed his body instantly, but a hint of confusion also flashed through his mind. Turning around with a puzzled expression, Draco met a pair of cold, deep black eyes. Perhaps I should teach you, on behalf of your father, what respect means. 20 points from Slytherin for you. Go stand over there. Upon hearing this, not just Draco, but even the young Slytherins were instantly dumbfounded. When did their head of house become so fair? Even Professor McGonagall wouldn't be so ruthless to Gryffindor, would she? Detention was one thing, but deducting 20 points. Had Draco broken a divine law? But, Professor Snape. Draco frantically tried to explain. If those 20 points were deducted, given the internal atmosphere of Slytherin House, even with the Malfoy family as his backing, he would still be ostracized. Most pure-blood wizards were in Slytherin House, and while not many people disregarded the Malfoy family, there were certainly quite a few, and some were at odds with them. Did I give you permission to speak? Snape glanced at Draco, looking at him as if he were a disgusting maggot. Why don't you proactively deal with the slugs needed for this class for your classmates? And you two idiots, what are you standing around for? Under Snape's glare, Crabbe and Goyle instantly shrank 2 heads, hunching over and retreating to the back row of the classroom to sit down. Now, open your books. This class, we will continue to learn how to brew a qualified potion for boils. If anyone shows no improvement in today's class, I will make you drink it. In the classroom, swept by a cold wave, only the trembling bodies of the young wizards remained. Even those without eyes could tell that Snape today was probably in a bad mood, perhaps due to a change of heart, and was on the verge of exploding, ready to shatter anyone who touched him. No one wanted to taste their own potion for boils, so the young wizards in the classroom were 12 times more focused in today's class, afraid to miss a single word Snape said while explaining the potion. A massacre began. Both Gryffindor and Slytherin were battered and bruised in today's slaughter. The 2 consecutive potions classes totaled 4 hours. Half the time was spent brewing potions, and the other half listening to explanations and preparing ingredients. But these 4 hours felt as long as 4 centuries. Lynn, still composed, was the first to complete his potion for boils 15 minutes before the end of class. Snape stood beside him, leaning slightly to gaze at the potion in the cauldron. The potion was a bright acidic green, even possessing a gem-like luster. Even with Snape's discerning eye, he couldn't find anything to fault. Very good, Snape nodded slowly. It seems you've learned a bit about potion-making techniques. The magical harmony is well managed. A fleeting memory flashed in his eyes, as if he saw his younger self. 5 points to Lynn. Snape stood up, no longer looking at Lynn's cauldron. He walked to the other side, next to Harry. The potion in Harry's cauldron was also acidic green, but the color wasn't very vibrant. This was due to not mastering the best heat during brewing and relatively unfamiliar magical fusion. However, as long as the brewing process was followed without mistakes, first-year students could achieve this level. Hermione's potion, who was with Harry, was also this color. Improved. Snape nodded slightly. Although it was hard to notice, his gaze towards Harry was much softer. 10 points to Harry. Perhaps you should all see what a qualified potion for boils looks like. The Gryffindor students breathed a sigh of relief, but before they could fully exhale, they swallowed it back down. But clearly, some people not only don't use their brains, but their eyes and hands are just for show. Now tell me, Weasley, what is that dog turd in your cauldron? Ron's face was ashen. The potion in his cauldron had completely turned into a charred, viscous substance, not much different from a pot of heated dog poop. I hear you have an unusual fondness for eating excrement, unlike others. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. Then you may begin now. Taste it, the delicacy you made with your own hands. 5 points from Gryffindor for your dog turd. The roll call of death began. Any student who failed to complete their potion brewing had at least 3 points deducted, some as many as 5. In less than 10 minutes, Gryffindor was slashed by 43 points. Slytherin fared even worse. Because of Crabbe and Goyle, those two had burned holes in their cauldrons and were directly docked a full 20 points by a murderous-looking Snape. This massacre, which spared no house, almost drained the young wizard's spirits. In class, Draco, who had been fiddling with slugs for over half an hour, looked pale. The potion in his cauldron was light green, which was a passable result compared to those who failed to brew their potions. After all, although the efficacy was a bit poor, it still had some effect. I told you to deal with the slugs, not to let the slugs replace your brain, Malfoy. Snape stood in front of Draco, looking at him as if he were a dead man. Perhaps I should let you taste it yourself. Draco trembled, shaking his head slightly. He felt he was not far from death. Snape scooped up a spoonful of the potion, pouring it over the cauldron, splashing light green droplets. What illusion makes you believe that you are superior and more capable than others? Is it your troll-violated brain? You're not even as good as that Gryffindor over there. These words, which amounted to ultimate humiliation in Slytherin House, made Draco collapse onto his chair. The judgment, spoken by the head of house himself, nailed him to Slytherin's pillar of shame. Detention starts this weekend, lasting until Halloween. Class dismissed. Upon seeing the hourglass of points, the Gryffindor little wizards were instantly devastated. Even with the bonus points from Lynn and Harry, they were still severely docked a total of 28 points. This directly broke Gryffindor's single-day point deduction record, making the Little Lions feel like dying. But after the truth behind the deduction spread, the Little Lions were delighted. Although they lost many points this time, Slytherin also suffered a major setback. There was nothing that could make them laugh more than this. Thanks to Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle, their efforts alone caused Slytherin to lose 40 points. Coupled with other deductions, Slytherin's single-day point deduction record was refreshed to 75 points. The hourglass, which originally had some reserves, was directly emptied and even owed dozens of gems. Across the Ravenclaw table, the Little Lions saw a group of gloomy little snakes collectively wearing masks of pain, with dark clouds floating over their entire table, and knives clattering down. Perhaps guessing what would happen, Draco didn't show up at the dining table at all. The two blokes who couldn't control their mouths and couldn't bear to miss dinner were very carefree, completely oblivious to the glances from all directions that wanted to skin them alive, burying their heads in their food. No doubt, as soon as these two guys left the Great Hall and the area within the professor's sight, the scene of them being ambushed and flushed down a toilet in the bathroom would certainly not be missed. If, on the second day, two bruised, waterlogged corpses were seen floating on the surface of the Black Lake, it would very likely be them. Fortunately, Hogwarts strictly prohibited such incidents, and Slytherin House was not Azkaban, but suffering was unavoidable. Although Snape's point deduction storm did not affect Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff this time, the little Badgers and Eagles couldn't help but feel a little worried. Their potions class was next Monday, and they might face judgment after the weekend. With Slytherin at the bottom, the atmosphere in the Gryffindor common room did not worsen after Friday's dinner. Amidst lively play, the second weekend arrived. Lynn went to the Hog's Head Inn alone to sell the potions he had made in his spare time this week. With the first pleasant transaction, the second one required no further bargaining. Compared to the secret passage, Lynn, who went alone, chose to apparate, taking less than 5 minutes for the round trip. But early on Saturday morning, a familiar voice entered his ears. Lynn, get up. Harry, who had once again burst into Lynn's dormitory, threw off his covers, pulling him out of bed. What is it? Lynn yawned and got up, groggily looking up, his school robes covering his face. Cho's Quidditch tryouts are this morning. Don't tell me you forgot. Doesn't that start at 9? Lynn, now awake, put on his clothes and glanced at the clock in the dormitory. It's just past 7 now. You can't exercise immediately after eating, you need time to digest first. Harry said as a matter of course, then turned to look at the others in the dormitory. Neville, Seamus, Dean, are you coming along? The Gryffindor team tryouts are also this morning. Want to come watch? Harry knew everyone in Lynn's dorm, except Ron. She'd been a bit displeased with Ron since the train, but she was familiar with everyone else in their year. All right. Seamus was the first to speak. He was also very interested in Quidditch. Neville, beside him, didn't speak but nodded quickly. He wasn't very skilled at riding a broom, and almost made a fool of himself in the previous flying lesson. Fortunately, Lynn was there to support him, or he would have certainly made a spectacle. Quidditch. How do you play that? Dean, from a Muggle family, didn't know much about it but was quite interested. Is it like football? I used to be on my school's football team. It's different. Quidditch is played on brooms, throwing a ball with your hands, Harry explained to Dean. Oh. So it's like basketball in the sky, right? Dean immediately understood. Sounds pretty interesting. It's not that far off. We'll know once we go and see. The few who quickly got up and changed their clothes hurriedly brushed their teeth and washed their faces. Harry had only left for 2 minutes when the now ready group walked into the common room. Hermione and Parvati, Harry's good friends, had also come down the stairs, and the group walked lively towards the Great Hall. Because of the Quidditch tryouts in the morning, even though it was Saturday, quite a few students came down early for breakfast, especially at the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor tables. Many Hufflepuffs also came. Although their tryouts were in the afternoon, it was good to watch the others' tryouts to prepare in advance. Only the Slytherin table was empty. When it came to Quidditch, Slytherin didn't get along with the other three houses. Playing dirty on and off the field was already a common tactic for the Slytherin team. They played very dirty, resorting to any means to win. Cho, are you nervous? After seeing Cho in the Great Hall, Lin went up to greet her and sat down next to her. A little, but not much. I feel like I can get in. Although I might sit on the bench for a while, I want to be a seeker. That position isn't open yet. Bennett won't leave until next year. Unless they are particularly passionate about Quidditch or genuinely talented in it. Generally, 6th and 7th year students in the Ravenclaw team choose to spend more time on studying and exams. Newt's nastily exhausting wizarding tests are equivalent to college entrance exams, and for most students, the results of this exam are likely to determine their work in life after graduation. But that's still pretty good. If I had to play now, I'd still be a bit scared. Cho ate her sandwich in small bites, and her previously nervous mood gradually calmed down. I'll just eat until I'm 5 parts full. Swallowing the last bite of her sandwich, Cho gathered her spirits and stood up. Lin, can you accompany me for some early practice? Me, as the golden snitch. Lin looked at Cho suspiciously. You can't just suddenly decide to train to see if you have the talent of a beater, can you? It's not impossible. Seeming to think it was a good idea, Cho's gaze fell on the French baguette lying on the table. Holy crap, isn't using a baguette a bit too brutal? Swallowing the remaining half of his sandwich whole, Lin, whose mind inexplicably played the quick use nunchaku BGM, bolted. He hadn't eaten Hogwarts baguettes yet, and who knew if the house elves had left them overnight. That thing could be used as a weapon after one night. Stop. Lin, don't run. Even if you catch me, I won't let you he. Give up. Thanks for watching.